Hey viewers, before we drift back thousands of years, just take a second with me. Wherever you're tuning in from, maybe late evening in the US, early morning somewhere else, maybe you're half asleep already, just know I'm really glad you're here. If you enjoy slow, sleepy journeys into the past, you can tap the little heart, drop a comment, tell me where you're listening from. I actually read those, and they help me shape these quiet trips. And tonight, or whatever time it is where you are, we're going somewhere warm, sunlit, dusty, and older than almost anything you've ever imagined. But before we step inside ancient Egypt, I want you to hold one tiny, suspenseful thought in your mind. There is one food, one simple, everyday food, that the ancient Egyptians considered so important that without it, their society would have collapsed. And yet almost nobody today even thinks about it. We'll reach that part. Slowly, gently. But let it sit in the back of your mind like a soft, buzzing mystery. Now, let's begin. Imagine standing on the edge of the Nile. Not the modern Nile with motorboats and bridges and tourists, but the quiet, ancient one. The water is low and glassy, sliding between banks lined with reeds, and behind it rise the fields. Long strips of soil turned dark and rich by the yearly flood. You can almost smell that earthy sweetness. For ancient Egyptians, this river wasn't just scenery or transportation. It was their pantry, their kitchen, their entire menu. Everything they ate began with the flood. And the first thing you'd notice about what ancient Egyptians ate is grain. Tons of grain, mountains of grain, entire lifetimes of grain. Wheat and barley were the foundation of their lives. Most people didn't eat just a little grain, they lived on it. Morning, evening, workdays, feast days, you name it. Grain was the heartbeat of ancient Egyptian food. And also, quietly, that mysterious food I hinted at. But we'll save that. For now, imagine a villager waking up at dawn. The air is cool, not yet burning with the midday sun. The first task of the day is grinding grain. If you've ever heard the soft, rhythmic scrape of stone against stone, it's almost hypnotic. An old, repetitive, peaceful sound. Women usually did this, leaning forward on flat grinding stones, pushing smaller stones back and forth until the grain turned into flour. That motion could last hours. Every single day. It was so constant that their bones show where marks from how their bodies leaned, twisted, worked. Grinding flour wasn't a chore. It was daily survival. With the flour they'd make bread. And not the fluffy, airy bread we know today. Imagine something denser, heavier, fuller. Egyptian bread came in endless shapes. Thick loaves, round loaves, triangular loaves, one shaped like fish, one shaped like human figures for religious offerings. The texture, probably coarse, sometimes gritty because of sand mixed into the flour from the grinding stones. On some days it might taste slightly sour, like a natural, early version of sourdough. Bread was everything. Currency, rations, offerings, meals. Workers at the pyramids were paid in bread. Priests were paid in bread. Families survived on it. And alongside it came beer. Not the golden, crisp, cold drink we think of, but a thick, hearty, porridge-like beer with bits of bread still floating in it. It was nutritious, filling, and much safer than drinking river water. Children drank beer. Elders drank beer. Everyone drank beer. It wasn't about intoxication. It was hydration, calories, and comfort. And then there was vegetable life. Soft green textures growing in the warm floodplain soil. Onions, strong and sharp, eaten raw or cooked. Garlic, believed to give strength, so workers chewed it. Leeks, cucumbers, lettuce. Ancient Egyptian lettuce wasn't exactly like ours. They thought it had special powers connected to fertility. The crunch of fresh vegetables was a treat in a land where drying, grinding, and storing food mattered more than freshness. Then we drift into legumes, lentils and chickpeas, soft little beads boiled into mushes and stews. Imagine the slow simmer of a clay pot over a small fire, bubbles rising in a thick brown mixture, scented with herbs if the family was lucky enough to have some. Lentils were cheap, filling, and essential. And of course, fish. The Nile was alive with them. Tilapia, catfish, mullet, countless others. Picture fishermen throwing nets, the sun glinting off the water, the slap of a fish hitting the wet bottom of a boat. Fish could be eaten fresh, dried, salted, even fermented in ways that might smell strong to us today but were treasured then. Sometimes it was a poor person's meal, sometimes a festival treat. The river was a refrigerator before refrigerators. Meat was rarer. Most Egyptians, especially the poor, didn't eat it often. Cattle, sheep, goats, geese. Animals were precious assets, so meat was saved for special moments. Festivals, ceremonies, temple offerings, big family events. Imagine the smell of roasting goose or beef drifting through a village. That scent meant something important was happening. And fruit. Oh, the fruit. Figs so soft you could press them open with your thumb. Dates sticky and sweet. Pomegranates bursting with bright seeds. Melons cooling the tongue. You can almost taste the sticky sugar of a dried date after a long day working in the sun. But through all of this, bread, beer, vegetables, fish, occasional meat, sweet fruit, one thread stays constant. Everything depended on the yearly flood. If the flood was generous, people ate well. If it was weak, hunger crept in quietly, spreading from house to house. Food in Egypt wasn't just nourishment, it was a measure of the gods' favor. And now we circle gently. Just a little back to that secret food I mentioned at the start. That humble, everyday thing the entire civilization depended on in a way even they might not have fully realized. You've already read the word in passing, maybe without noticing, but to reveal it too soon would break the quiet rhythm of this storytelling. We'll get there, slowly. For now, just stay with this picture. A warm morning, the smell of earth, the scrape of grinding stones, the hum of the Nile, and the simple, steady foods that kept ancient Egypt alive for over 3,000 years. All right, settle back in. Let your shoulders drop a little. Imagine the warmth of that ancient sunlight on your skin as we quietly step deeper into daily Egyptian eating life. No rush, no hurry, just soft drifting through time. So, picture yourself walking through a small village along the Nile, maybe around 1500 BCE. It's early, the sun just warming the mud brick walls. You hear distant voices, women chatting softly as they finish their morning grinding, a donkey braying somewhere, a child laughing. And then there's the faint smell of baking bread drifting from the communal oven. Most villages had shared ovens, big beehive-shaped structures. Families would prepare their dough at home, then bring it to these ovens to bake. Imagine standing there, feeling the heat roll out every time someone lifts the cover. The air smells like warm flour, a little smoky from the fuel. Bread in ancient Egypt wasn't baked alone. It was a community rhythm. Women talked, exchanged news, shared worries about harvests or floods while they waited their turn. The dough itself varied. Sometimes it included ground barley, giving it a nutty taste. Sometimes wheat. Sometimes flavored with herbs, sesame seeds, or a drizzle of honey if a family had enough to spare. Every loaf was slightly different depending on the household, the grain quality, the water, the temperature. But in the end, bread was the anchor, kept people alive. And right next to the bread world was the beer world. One blending into the other, because beer was basically liquid bread. Egyptians brewed it by baking a special type of bread, then soaking it in water, letting it ferment. Imagine that dense smell, warm, yeasty, grain-rich. The beer would come out cloudy, thick, filling. Children drank mild versions. Adults drank stronger ones. And workers, especially laborers building temples or tombs, received beer daily as part of their rations. We often imagine ancient Egypt as golden, glorious, glittering, but this beer, this bread, these vegetables, this was the real engine behind everything else. The pyramids weren't fueled by mystical diets or lavish meals. They were fueled by bread, beer, onions, garlic, and fish. Now, wander a little further with me. Past the ovens, past the palm trees casting long shadows over the sandy ground, and look into the small gardens behind homes. These household gardens were tiny but precious. Egyptians grew onions, leeks, lettuce, radishes, cucumbers. Imagine someone bending over a patch of soil, brushing sand off a row of onions, checking if they're fat enough to harvest. These vegetables didn't just taste good. They were believed to have healing properties. They made the body strong, gave energy, kept illness away. And garlic, Oh, garlic in Egypt was everything. Strong, sharp, almost biting when eaten raw. Workers ate it believing it increased strength and stamina. Priests used it in rituals, though sometimes avoided it because of its powerful smell. But imagine biting into a fresh clove while working under the sun. That quick jolt of heat and flavor. But vegetables alone weren't enough, so let's drift to the fields. Long rows of beans and lentils growing, filling the air with a soft, earthy scent after watering. Egyptians valued legumes highly because they were filling, cheap, and stored well. A pot of lentil stew simmering was one of the most common meals for ordinary families. Thick, hearty, calming after long labor. Now imagine walking down toward the Nile itself. The water shimmering, birds calling, fishermen pulling nets. You see a man kneeling near the bank, cleaning a fish with slow, practiced motions. The scales catch the sunlight. The Nile was full of life. Tilapia with their round, flat bodies. Catfish with their whiskers. Eels twisting like ribbons. Some fish were eaten fresh, grilled over small fires. Others were dried or salted to last for weeks. Dried fish had a strong smell, but it was crucial for survival during bad harvests. Fish wasn't only food. It was economic stability. A bad fishing season meant food shortages. A good one meant markets full of dried strips and fresh catches. And fish appeared in religious imagery too, symbols of rebirth and abundance. As we're walking along the bank, let your mind drift toward the animals grazing nearby. Cattle grazing in slow, heavy steps. Goats picking at anything green. Sheep clustered in small groups. Geese hissing softly. Animals were wealth. Meat was precious. Most families rarely tasted beef. That was for temples, for offerings to gods, for wealthy households. But goose, duck, or goat might appear at festivals. Imagine the smell of roasting meat during a holiday. A sweet, savory scent drifting between mud brick homes, making children's mouths water. And fruit. Imagine baskets full of figs, soft and squishy. Dates long and sticky. Pomegranates with their jewel-like seeds. Melons with cool, watery sweetness. Fruit was a treat, something families treasured. Dates especially were almost sacred. They provided energy, sweetness, and lasted long when dried. The markets of ancient Egypt were alive with this food. Traders calling out, baskets piled high, smells mixing. Fresh onions, grilled fish, beer brewing nearby, sweet figs, sharp herbs, hot bread. If you close your eyes, maybe you can almost hear it. The hum of a hot afternoon in an ancient market. And through all of this, there's still that one thing. That one deceptively simple food. The quiet backbone of the whole diet. The thing that isn't bread itself but is hidden inside bread, without which none of this would have worked. We're moving closer to it. Drifting toward it through fields and kitchens and markets. Gently. Slowly. But for now, let's stay in this warm, dusty world a moment longer. Feel the rough ground under your feet. Hear the distant grinding stones. Smell the beer fermenting and the bread baking. Because all of this builds toward that secret thread that held everything together. Alright. Let's ease back into that soft, slow rhythm. Imagine the heat settling over the land as the morning stretches toward noon in ancient Egypt. The Nile glitters, the shadows shorten, and life moves in that steady, unhurried way people mastered thousands of years ago. Breathe in, breathe out, and wander with me deeper into what people ate, how they cooked, and how every meal connected them to their world. We've talked about the main foods, the bread, beer, vegetables, fish, but now let's move a little closer, into the kitchens themselves. Not kitchens like we know today, with metal pots and refrigerators and glowing lights, but small, humble spaces outside each home or in a courtyard. Most homes didn't cook indoors. The smoke would fill the entire house, and the heat, unbearable. So families cooked outside, where the breezes carried the smoke away and the sunlight helped warm the clay ovens. Picture a simple setup. A small fire pit made of stones, a few clay pots, baskets of grain, a grinding stone, maybe some herbs tied with fiber cord to dry in the shade. The smell of smoke drifts out toward the street. Children chase one another nearby. A chicken wanders past, pecking the ground. And inside those clay pots, something always simmering. Lentil stew, barley porridge, Fish stew. Small vegetables softened in warm liquid. Stew wasn't just food, it was survival. Because when you have limited ingredients, boiling them together brings out everything. Flavor, nutrition, warmth. Imagine the slow bubbling sound, the steam rising in thin white lines. A pot would sit for hours, thickening, darkening, turning into something filling and comforting. One of the most beloved dishes was a mixture of beans and barley cooked together. Imagine the texture, slightly chewy, slightly soft. It would absorb whatever flavors were tucked in. Maybe onions sautéed lightly in oil, maybe garlic crushed and stirred in, maybe a sprinkle of coriander or salt if the family had it. Spices were rare, expensive, so most dishes tasted earthy, simple, honest. But people did have seasonings, though not many. Salt was precious, and much of it came from trade. Coriander grew naturally and was used often. Cumin existed, dill sometimes, but the heavy spices we associate with Middle Eastern food today, cinnamon, pepper, cloves, were luxury imports or not commonly used yet. Egyptian meals tasted mild, relying on texture and natural flavors. And now, let's step into a wealthier home. Not a king's palace, not yet, but a middle-class home, maybe a scribe's house. The smells here are richer. There's more oil used in cooking, more fresh herbs, more variety. Bread might be baked with honey or dates mixed in. Meats might appear more often, perhaps grilled skewers of duck or goose. Fruit baskets might be fuller, figs arranged neatly, grapes cooling in a bowl, dates stored in jars. The kitchen is larger, with more pots and tools. But even in these nicer kitchens, something remains the same. Grain is still the foundation. Bread and beer still dominate. Wealth changes quantity, not the core diet. And now, drift with me even further, into the palace kitchens. Completely different world. Dozens of servants, fires crackling, cooks shouting instructions, slicing knives tapping wood. Tables full of ingredients. Cattle meat, roasted goose, fresh fish delivered daily, baskets of dates, jars of honey, bowls of almonds and sesame. Exotic foods brought by traders. Incense, spices, oils. But the most interesting thing is this. Even the pharaoh, even the nobles, still ate bread and beer as the base of their meals. Luxurious ingredients added richness, but the heart of Egyptian food stayed humble. Now, let's wander away from the kitchens and return to the fields, because understanding food means understanding where it came from. And here in the fields, something important is happening. Look at the workers moving slowly through rows of tall crops. Their hands brush over long golden stalks. They harvest barley and wheat using curved flint knives. Grain is the treasure of this land. You might hear the soft rustling as they gather bundles, then tie them together. You might hear the rhythmic thud 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 of people beating grain to separate kernels. The air fills with dust. Sunlight turns the dust into sparkling golden flecks. Egyptian workers did this every harvest season. And afterward, the grain went straight to storage bins. Massive silo-like structures where the temperature stayed cool enough to keep grain from spoiling. Guards protected these storerooms because grain wasn't just food. It was money. It paid workers, fed armies, funded temples. Grain was stability. And yet, even grain wasn't really the secret food. The food I've been hinting at since batch 1. But we are closer now. Very close. Because if grain was the backbone, what transformed the grain into life? What made everything possible? This hidden ingredient was everywhere, yet almost invisible. Without it, bread wouldn't rise. Beer wouldn't ferment. Fields wouldn't stay fertile. And society wouldn't function. We will reveal it, but not yet. Because first, we need to walk through the markets of ancient Egypt. Food wasn't only grown or cooked. It was traded, exchanged, celebrated. Imagine a busy marketplace at midday. Vendors shouting, donkeys braying, someone selling fresh fish on woven mats, someone else selling onions in baskets. The air thick with smells, some delicious, some not. A beer seller shouting for customers. A bread seller offering steaming loaves. Children weaving through the crowd. Old women bargaining for one more onion, one more handful of grain. And it is here, in the market, that food becomes more than nourishment. It becomes culture. People gossip over vegetables. They negotiate the price of a fish. They laugh, argue, share news. And in every direction, food reflects the social layers. The poor buying dried fish and barley, the middle class buying vegetables and honey, the wealthy sending servants to purchase meats and spices. Food wasn't just something Egyptians consumed. It shaped every hour of their day, every ritual, every festival, every life. And slowly, you can feel the important truth emerging. That one element woven through everything, from bread to beer, from farming to religion. We're not quite there yet, but almost. Just breathe, stay with the rhythm. And when you're ready, settle in again. Let the air around you feel a little quieter. Imagine the sun now sliding toward the late afternoon over ancient Egypt. The shadows grow longer, the heat softens, and the whole landscape seems to hum with that slow, ancient rhythm. Breathe gently. And walk with me deeper into what people truly experienced when they ate, cooked, and lived around their food. We've wandered through kitchens and markets, but now imagine yourself stepping onto a dusty village path as the day begins to cool. You hear sandals brushing against the sand, see farmers returning from the fields with baskets of leftover grain on their shoulders. Hear soft voices trading stories of the workday. Food wasn't separate from life, it was life. And now, as the world cools, families begin gathering for their main evening meal. Picture a family sitting outside their mud brick home, the sky shifting from gold to deep blue. The mother ladles stew from a pot, thick, warm, comforting. Maybe lentils today, or barley with onions. The father tears pieces of bread, dipping them into the bowl. The children sit close, faces still dusty from the afternoon, giggling between bites. There's no metal forks or plates, just clay bowls, woven mats, and hands. Eating together wasn't a formal ritual. It was simply the quiet moment where everyone exhaled after a long day. And now imagine the taste of that stew, not rich or spicy but warm and earthy. Imagine biting into bread that's dense, rough, with bits of bran still in it. Imagine the faint bitterness of barley mixing with the sweetness of onions cooked down all day. It's simple but deeply filling, the kind of food that settles into you like calm. Now look around, behind the family, near the wall, clay jars line the house. These are the ancient refrigerators, cool storage places for grains, dried fish, beer, dates. Everything precious kept sealed inside to protect from insects and heat. Some jars are filled with emmer wheat, others with barley, some with fish preserved in salt. If you listen closely, you might even hear the soft fizz of beer fermenting quietly inside. Beer especially was essential at night. Imagine a jar being opened, a little puff of fermented air escaping, the liquid inside cloudy and thick. It wasn't just a drink, it provided calories after long workdays. Imagine the cool slip of it down the throat, grainy and slightly sweet. This was their comfort at the end of a tiring day. And as evening falls deeper, you might smell oil warming in a pot. Egyptians used oil from radish seeds, bolanos fruits, and sometimes sesame. With that oil they fried small cakes made of ground beans or barley. Not crunchy like modern fried foods, but soft and warm. These little cakes were quick energy, snacks for workers, treats for children, fillers when meat was too expensive. And speaking of meat, let's drift now to a rare, special evening, a festival night. Imagine a village preparing for a celebration. There's excitement in the air. Animals are brought forward. Perhaps a goat for roasting, maybe a goose. The fire crackles brightly. The smell of fat hitting flame fills the air. Sharp, savory, intoxicating. People gather, smiling, talking, savoring the rare luxury of meat. Meat in ancient Egypt wasn't everyday life. It was joy, reward, ritual. Beef was sacred, often offered in temples. Goose was prized. Goat and sheep were for family feasts. Imagine tearing into a piece of roasted goose, the skin crisp, the meat tender. Such a meal could mark a birth, a festival of a god, a successful harvest. And harvest feasts. Imagine those. Whole communities celebrating the success of the Nile flood, thanking the gods for food. Baskets overflowing with new grain. Jars of fresh beer being shared. Tables or mats laid out with vegetables, bread, fruit. Laughter rising into the night. Now, let's wander away softly from the noise of the celebration and toward something quieter, the religious meaning of food. Because for Egyptians, eating wasn't only physical, it was spiritual. The gods had favorite foods. Temples received daily offerings. Bread, beer, onions, lettuce, fruits, cuts of meat. Imagine rows of bread baked specially for gods, shaped like animals, stars, symbols. Imagine priests carrying trays of food into sacred spaces, chanting softly, placing the offerings before statues. Afterward, the food didn't go to waste. Priests ate it. Temple workers ate it. The gods received the love, the gesture. The people received the calories. Even in death, food mattered. The ancient Egyptians believed the afterlife was a continuation of the earthly world, so they placed food in tombs. Dried meat, jars of beer, baskets of grain. Imagine a wealthy tomb stocked like a pantry. Rows of jars, dried fish, sealed vessels of wine, even tiny loaves of symbolic bread carved from stone when real bread couldn't last. Food wasn't just physical. It was protection, blessing, future survival. Now picture yourself walking deeper into one of those fields again, the ones that stretch endlessly along the Nile. The grain moves in slow waves in the breeze. The workers bend down, cut stalks, tie bundles, carry them to threshing floors. And here is where we come even closer to that secret ingredient. You see workers pounding grain. You see others tossing it in the air, letting the wind blow away the chaff. The separated kernels fall into baskets. All of that grain, all of that effort, is nothing without something tiny and powerful that will transform it. A thing that Egyptians used constantly, loved instinctively, but rarely talked about because it simply existed in their world. And this humble thing, used in bread, in beer, in farming itself, was the invisible magic connecting everything they ate. We're nearly at the reveal now. But not quite. We need one more step, one more gentle drift through their world, before we uncover it. Just breathe. Stay in the dust and sunlight of that ancient land with me. The answer is close. All right. Come back into that warm, sun-softened world. The slow heartbeat of ancient Egypt. Imagine the sky now shifting towards soft pink as the last light of the day stretches across the fields. Everything feels quieter, calmer, the sounds of work fading into the background. Breathe slowly. And drift with me deeper into the heart of Egyptian food life. And toward that secret ingredient we're slowly circling around. As we move through the fields, imagine the scent of grain dust still hanging in the air. Workers brush it off their arms as they gather tools. In the distance you can hear cattle lowing softly, pulling in clusters near watering areas before the night settles. But now, instead of following the workers home, let's follow one particular thing: the grain itself. Imagine a large woven basket filled to the top with barley kernels. Each kernel tiny, light, almost insignificant, and yet powerful enough to sustain a civilization. The basket is carried into a granary, where other baskets sit in tall stacks. You can almost feel the coolness inside, the thick clay walls holding back the heat. Grain transformed into bread. Grain transformed into beer. Grain reserved for emergencies. Grain paid to workers as wages. Everywhere you look, grain sits at the center of daily survival. But grain alone is lifeless. Right. Dormant. Something has to awaken it. Something has to transform it. That quiet, invisible something is still waiting for us. Hidden, patient, ancient. But before we reach it, let's step inside one more daily ritual. Grinding. Imagine a woman kneeling on a woven mat, leaning forward over a stone saddle quern. The grinding stone rests in front of her like a shallow trough. She pushes a smaller stone back and forth across it, crushing the kernels little by little. The sound: scrape, 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 steady, even, rhythmic. If you listen closely, it's almost soothing, the way waves hitting the shore can soothe. This was the soundtrack of ancient Egyptian mornings. The work is hard. The flour comes out with tiny pieces of grit from the stones, which means many ancient Egyptians had worn teeth. But the flour, rough as it was, became bread, and the bread became life. Now imagine her adding just a little water to the flour. She mixes it with her hands, pressing the dough together. If the family is lucky, the dough has time to sit, to breathe before baking. If they're wealthier, they might add honey or dates to sweeten it. And here, right here, is where the secret begins to reveal itself. If you let dough sit, even for a short time, something begins to happen. Something tiny, invisible, alive begins to wake up inside it. Bubbles form. The dough rises slightly. The bread becomes lighter. This wasn't magic. This wasn't guesswork. It was chemistry. Ancient, accidental, but fully embraced by Egyptians. That invisible living force was it. But don't rush the reveal yet. Hold it gently. We'll get there fully in a moment. 'Cause first, let's walk over to the beer vats. Imagine a clay vat partially filled with water and special beer bread. A soft, baked mixture of grain designed specifically for brewing. The bread breaks apart in the water. The mixture sits, warm from the fire. And again, something begins to happen. Starts to bubble. It starts to swell. It begins to transform. That same invisible force, the tiny organisms floating through the air, living on grains, resting on tools, begin their work again. Fermentation. Rising. Life drawn out of ordinary grain. This wasn't a technique Egyptians invented intentionally at first. It was something they discovered, embraced, perfected over centuries. Imagine watching the beer foam slightly at the surface. Imagine the smell. Sour, sweet, warm, comforting. Egyptians didn't see yeast, but they saw what it did. And so, without naming it, they used it constantly. But yeast wasn't only in bread and beer. It was in the soil. It helped break down organic material, keeping fields fertile. It lived in the air around the Nile. It drifted into dough, crawled into pots, settled in grains. Yeast connected the fields to the kitchens to the markets to the temples. That tiny microscopic organism, invisible everywhere, allowed the Egyptians to survive through droughts, build massive monuments, and sustain millions of lives for thousands of years. And that's the hidden ingredient we've been circling around. But we'll come back to yeast soon. Unfold it slowly, understand how it shaped every corner of life. For now, let's drift back into people's evening meals. Because even with all the magic that yeast brought, food remained humble. Picture a mother handing a child a small baked cake, barley mixed with dates. The child bites into it, the sweetness surprising after a long day. Nearby, the father cracks open a jar of dried fish, passing strips to the oldest son. The taste is salty, strong, but satisfying. Imagine the cool night breeze now settling over the village. The stars begin to appear, bright, clear, untouched by modern lights. Egyptians loved the stars, tracked them, worshipped them. Many of their calendars, festivals, and agricultural cycles were connected to the sky. And those cycles controlled food. Planting season, harvest season, flood season. Everything tied back together. The sky, the river, the soil, the grain, the yeast, the food, the people. And if you listen closely, maybe you can hear a low, soft sound coming from a nearby house. A man singing while mashing beans for the next day's stew. The sound is not sharp or loud. It drifts slowly through the evening air. Like a lullaby, the land itself hums. That's the deep beauty of ancient Egyptian food culture. Not complex spices or extravagant dishes, but the gentle, grounded simplicity that carried them through centuries. And now that we've brushed against the secret ingredient, in the next batch we'll sink deeper into how yeast shaped everything. Bread, beer, festivals, agriculture, society, and how people interacted with it without ever seeing it. Just breathe. We'll move forward slowly. Quietly. Alright. Let your breath fall into a slow, easy rhythm again. Imagine the stars brightening above ancient Egypt, the warm wind brushing softly against the mud brick walls, the Nile whispering in the distance. We're still drifting through that world, still exploring what people ate, how they lived around their food, and how that tiny, invisible helper shaped their entire civilization. Now that we've gently uncovered the secret, yeast, let's settle deeper into its presence. Imagine it not as something scientific or complicated, but as a quiet, unseen partner in every Egyptian kitchen. Picture a woman preparing dough before sunrise. She scoops flour into a bowl, adds water, and begins mixing. First, the dough is stiff, heavy. But she knows, almost instinctively, that if she leaves it sitting for a little while, the dough will change. She doesn't have a word for yeast. She doesn't think of microorganisms. But she understands the effect. She covers the dough with a linen cloth, smoothing it gently. Imagine her stepping outside to check on her children or water a few herbs. When she returns, the dough has grown slightly softer, puffier, warm to the touch. She smiles, because she knows this means the bread will be good today. Not flat and dense, but slightly lifted, easier to chew, easier to share. That quiet rise, that soft swelling, that was yeast at work. And now drift with me into a brewery. Not a modern brewery with steel vats and machinery, but an ancient Egyptian beer house. Imagine large clay vats lined up in rows. The air is warm and thick with the smell of fermenting grain. Sweet, sour, earthy. Workers stir the mixture with long wooden paddles. The beer is bubbling, alive, slowly transforming from soaked bread into a thick drink that nourishes thousands. Again, yeast is working silently in every vat. Egyptians didn't see it, but they understood fermentation deeply. They knew the signs. Bubbles meant good beer. Foam meant life. Sweet, soft smell meant success. A foul smell meant something went wrong. Now picture a priest overseeing the preparation of bread and beer meant as offerings to the gods. These foods weren't just everyday items. They symbolized life, rebirth, nourishment. The rising of bread, the transformation, was seen as sacred. In fact, in some belief systems, the rising could symbolize resurrection or renewal. Imagine priests speaking softly, blessing the food before placing it in front of temple statues. The yeast continues working quietly. Rising the bread meant for gods, fermenting the beer poured onto altars, drifting through the air even inside sacred space. And now imagine the fields again. After harvest, when grain is stored and used over months, farmers sometimes noticed patterns. Certain baskets of grain seemed to produce better dough. Others didn't. Of course they didn't know it, but some baskets carried more natural yeast from the air, from past batches, from their hands, from their tools. This yeast carried memory, flavor, tradition. One village's bread tasted slightly different from another because the yeast strains were different, carried through generations. This is how ancient Egypt created a silent food culture, invisible but distinct. Now let's step back into everyday life. Imagine a young woman preparing to get married. Her mother hands her a small lump of dough, saved from the previous day's bread making. This dough is precious, contains active yeast. It will help her make bread in her new home. It's like handing down a piece of family history, a living part of the household. Imagine that small lump wrapped gently in cloth, carried carefully, guarded like treasure. Yeast tied families together. And now picture workers building a huge temple. Imagine hundreds of men hauling stone blocks, pulling heavy ropes in the heat. Their energy must be replenished constantly. What do they receive every day? Bread, beer, onions, and fish. The beer is nutritious, dense, full of calories. The bread is hearty, both made possible by yeast. Without yeast, the bread would be harder to digest. The beer wouldn't exist. The calories needed to build temples and tombs wouldn't be available. Imagine a laborer lifting a jar of beer to his lips, thick, warm, fresh from fermentation. It tastes slightly sweet, slightly sour. It fills his stomach and gives strength. This is how yeast built monuments. Now drift gently into the royal palace. Yes, even here, in rooms lined with paintings, in halls filled with servants, yeast is quietly at work. Royal bakers prepare dozens of bread shapes every day. Animal-shaped loaves, tall conical loaves, flatbreads, festival breads sweetened with honey. All rise gently because of yeast. Some loaves are placed before the pharaoh, others in front of God's images. Some are buried in tombs. Bread was so important that Egyptians carved scenes of baking into tomb walls, as if to ensure eternal nourishment. Imagine those carvings. Men grinding grain, women kneading dough, bread rising in molds. The Egyptians believed that by depicting it, the dead would receive endless food in the afterlife. And yeast was inside every loaf, every offering, every carved scene though unseen. But to truly understand how deeply Egyptians trusted yeast, we need to watch them make sourdough-like starters. Not intentionally, but naturally. Imagine a bowl of leftover dough sitting overnight. By morning, it's alive with bubbles. This old dough was used to start new bread. If the dough was too sour, they mixed in more fresh flour. If it wasn't rising enough, they let it sit longer. They didn't need to know the science. Their hands knew. Their eyes knew. The dough spoke to them. And this relationship, humans and yeast, is perhaps one of the oldest partnerships in history. Now imagine the next day. The sun rises. Birds call above the Nile. A woman opens her storage jar, scoops some old dough, sighs with relief. It's still alive. She mixes it into fresh flour. The dough softens, warms, begins to rise. And she smiles because she knows her family will eat well today. Food in ancient Egypt wasn't glamorous. It was steady, reliable, deeply tied to the cycles of nature. Yeast made that possible, quietly, invisibly, constantly. And now that we've settled deeper into the world of yeast, in the next batch we'll continue exploring more foods, more textures, more rituals, moving slowly into fruits, sweets, cooking methods, farming cycles, and how Egyptians experience taste itself. For now, let the evening settle again. The night deepening over ancient Egypt. The smell of bread lingering in the air. All right. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. And imagine the soft sounds of an ancient Egyptian morning drifting back into your ears. The quiet splash of oars on the Nile. The faint chatter of women grinding grain. The distant call of animals waking in their pens. We're still in that world, slowly, calmly exploring what people ate. How every flavor, every texture, every smell shaped daily life thousands of years ago. We've drifted through bread, beer, and yeast. So now, in this next stretch, imagine the broader table of ancient Egypt coming into focus. Simple, repetitive, comforting, but still full of small pleasures. Picture a farmer's home. It's a little mud brick house. Warm, quiet, walls the color of baked sand. The family gathers around a low woven mat. The father returns from the fields with something wrapped in leaves. Dates. Not big glossy dates like you see today, but smaller ones, sticky, sweet, almost caramel-like when chewed slowly. Imagine the children reaching eagerly, their little fingers shiny with sugar within seconds. Dates were a gift. An easy, reliable sweetness in a world without refined sugar, without candies, without desserts the way we know them. Imagine chewing one slowly, warm, soft, rich, the taste spreading across your tongue in slow waves. And now imagine figs. Softer still, with tiny seeds that crunch lightly when you bite down. Egyptians loved figs. They dried them, mashed them, baked them into bread, ate them fresh from the tree. A bowl of figs was like a bowl of comfort food. Imagine the feeling of breaking open a fig, the inside glistening like a tiny piece of sunlight. Fruit was precious, but not rare. It grew easily along the Nile's fertile banks. Lemons didn't exist there yet. Oranges didn't either, but grapes did. Imagine vineyards stretching along the river, men pruning vines carefully. Grapes became wine for the wealthy, but also dried into raisins for everyone else. Picture a child chewing on a handful of raisins after a long morning, the sweetness helping them push through chores. Now drift toward vegetables, the everyday steady part of the diet. Onions, garlic, leeks. Imagine the strong, sharp smell. Egyptians loved these. They believed onions gave strength. Garlic, too, Workers building pyramids were given garlic to keep them energized. Imagine a pot of stew boiling slowly, bubbling around chopped onions that soften into a rich base. Let yourself feel that warmth, the steam rising from an earthen pot, the smell of slow-cooked vegetables calming and steady. Imagine cucumbers sliced thin, eaten fresh to cool the body under the desert sun. Radishes, crunchy and peppery. Lettuce, not crisp modern lettuce, but long, stalk-like lettuce with a slightly bitter taste. Egyptians didn't just eat lettuce. They held religious symbolism in it. Imagine priests offering it to gods because they believed it represented renewal and fertility. Now walk with me into a small kitchen. Just a simple space, a clay oven shaped like a beehive, a couple of baskets, a few pots. Imagine a woman slicing a handful of onions, her eyes watering, her fingers moving with the smooth confidence of someone who's done this every day of her life. She tosses onions into a pan, adds a splash of oil, sesame oil or maybe castor oil. Imagine the sizzle, the comforting smell filling the room. She adds a handful of pulses, lentils or chickpeas. Egyptians ate a lot of legumes. Lentil stew was thick, heavy, warm. Imagine tasting it, feeling it fill your stomach in slow, steady waves. This wasn't luxury food. It was survival food. But it was good, comforting, familiar. Now imagine fish, one of the main proteins along the Nile. Picture fishermen standing in reed boats, casting nets as the sun glows orange on the water's surface. The fish haul comes in flapping, glistening silver, alive with movement. Families prepare fish in simple ways: grilling, drying, salting. Imagine a dried fish hung in the sun, hard and salty, later boiled into a stew to soften again. There were catfish, tilapia, mullet, common fish in the Nile. Imagine the taste. Earthy, river-like, simple. Not spicy, not heavily seasoned, but satisfying for people who worked long hours under a relentless sun. And then, imagine the smell of a holiday approaching. Festivals were huge in Egypt. Imagine crowds gathering, music, dances, drinking beer until cheeks flushed in the heat. On special days, food became richer. Honey appeared more often. Cakes, simple ones made with flour, dates, figs, and honey, were shaped for offerings or shared among families. Imagine biting into a festival cake. Dense, warm, sticky sweet. A rare treat that pulled children into excited giggles. Now picture herbs. Mint, dill, coriander. Egyptians didn't have a huge variety of spices like later civilizations, but they used herbs to flavor food subtly. Imagine the faint coolness of mint in a drink. Coriander seeds crushed in a mortar and sprinkled into bread dough. Dill floating in a stew like wisps of green. Everything was mild, soft, gentle in flavor, because the land itself encouraged simplicity. And now imagine the role of the Nile again. The rhythmic, magical pulse of everything they ate. Every year, the river rose, flooded, left behind rich black soil. This soil grew their wheat, their barley, their vegetables, their fruit trees. Imagine standing by the riverbank as water retreats, leaving wet, shiny land behind. Farmers knead mud with their bare feet, planting seeds that would feed their families for months. Food in ancient Egypt wasn't just nourishment. It was a cycle, pattern, promise. The Nile gave. The people harvested. Families cooked. And life continued. Now imagine a grandmother teaching her granddaughter how to prepare lentils. Her voice slow, soft, patient. She explains how much water to add, how long to simmer, how to tell when the stew is ready by smell alone. This knowledge wasn't written anywhere. It lived in hands, gestures, memories. Food culture passed down gently, generation to generation. And as you drift through this scene, imagine how quiet everything feels. The soft clatter of clay pots, the distant sound of goats bleating, the crackle of firewood beneath a pot. The world of ancient Egypt wasn't silent, but it was unhurried. Steady, rhythmic like breath. Now let the images settle. The figs, the onions, the lentils, the fish, the dates, the herbs. All blending into the daily life of millions of people across thousands of years. In the next batch, we'll drift deeper into how meals were eaten, what breakfast felt like, what lunch looked like, how the wealthy dined, how the poor survived, and how food shaped community itself. For now, breathe softly. Feel yourself still sitting in that ancient kitchen, warm light flickering on clay walls, the smell of stew drifting upward. Alright, take a slow breath in, and let it out gently. Imagine the soft glow of dawn rising over the Nile again, the quiet hum of life stirring inside ancient Egypt. In this batch, we drift into the rhythm of meals, how people actually sat, ate, shared, and experienced food each day. No modern spice racks. No dining tables with chairs. Just simple routines shaped by heat, work, and the slow pulse of the river. Imagine the first meal of the day. Not really breakfast the way we think of it, but a small, early nourishment. Picture a farmer stepping out before sunrise. The light is faint, blue, and cool. He scoops a small piece of leftover bread, maybe hardened from the night, dips it into beer or water to soften it, chews slowly as he starts walking toward the fields. Sometimes he takes a handful of dates, sometimes a few onions. Simple, strong flavors meant to keep him steady through hours of labor. Imagine him chewing silently, listening to the distant splash of irrigation water, feeling the earth under his feet. No hurry, just routine. Now imagine the farmer's wife inside the tiny house. She wakes the children, hands them small pieces of bread or maybe a thin porridge made from barley. The porridge is warm, simple, slightly thick. No sweetness unless she drops in a mashed figure picture that soft steam rising in the dim morning light. Children slurp quietly. There's no formal table. They kneel or sit cross-legged on mats. This is how millions began their day. Now drift with me to a worker settlement near a great building site, maybe near the construction of a temple or one of the great pyramids. Imagine hundreds of mud brick houses clustered together. Men gather early, each holding a small loaf of bread and a jar of beer. They talk softly as they eat, not leisurely but not rushed either, just sharing the morning. Beer in ancient Egypt wasn't for getting drunk in the early hours. It was thick, nutritious, filling. Imagine drinking it. Warm, slightly sour, almost like a liquid bread. It settles in the stomach like a heavy blanket. And now imagine the wealthy, the nobles, the officials, the scribes. Their morning begins differently. Picture a small tray brought by servants, with figs, freshly baked soft bread, maybe cheese made from goat's milk, and a small dish of honey. They dip bread into honey slowly, savoring it. Honey was precious. Not rare but valuable. Imagine the golden sweetness coating their tongues, something comforting before a long day of managing estates and workers. Now let's move on to the main meal of the day, eaten later. Sometimes mid-morning, sometimes afternoon. Imagine a simple household again. The mother prepares the largest meal once she's finished grinding grain for the day. You can hear the grinding stone again, that rhythmic, scraping sound. Women grinding for hours to turn hard wheat kernels into flour. The flour dusts their arms, their faces, their clothes. It's tiring, but it's part of life. After grinding, she cooks. Imagine her stirring a pot of lentils that have been simmering for a while, the smell drifting through the house. She adds onions, maybe a few herbs if available. She might bake fresh flatbread or reheat yesterday's bread over a warm stone. Imagine the children watching, waiting, hungry after chores. When the meal is ready, everyone sits on the floor again, no plates. Just communal bowls. They tear bread with their hands, use it to scoop stew, and eat in calm, small bites. Egyptians ate with their hands. It was natural, practical, familiar. Imagine that soft tearing sound. The warm texture of bread in fingertips. The slow dipping into thick stew. Now walk with me into the home of a wealthy family. Their dining space is larger, decorated, with servants moving quietly. Imagine low tables, maybe decorated with painted scenes or carvings. Servants bring dishes of roasted fowl, duck, goose, sometimes even small birds. Picture the golden color of roasted skin, brushed with a glaze of honey or sprinkled with coriander seeds. There are plates of lettuce, cucumbers, grapes, bowls of stewed beans with garlic, trays of figs stuffed with nuts. Imagine the smell, warm, rich, a little sweet. Guests recline on couches or sit on stools, enjoying longer meals filled with conversation. Even then, the food is simple by modern standards. But compared to the common people, it's luxurious. Now shift into evening meals, which were often smaller, lighter. Imagine the sun setting, that bright orange glow stretching across the Nile. Families gather again, tired from the day. Maybe they eat leftover bread, a few vegetables, or a small portion of fish. Children drift into sleep soon after. And now drift into a different scene. A festival time meal. Imagine crowds gathering near a temple, music playing, dancers swaying, people laughing. Men carry jars of freshly brewed beer. Women pass out small cakes shaped like animals or symbols of gods. These cakes, baked with honey and dates, were part of celebration. Imagine their warmth, their sweetness. Imagine biting into one under the flickering light of torches. Food wasn't just nourishment during festivals. It was joy, community, celebration. And then imagine religious meals, offerings. Priests prepare bread, beer, vegetables, sometimes meat, to lay before statues of gods. Imagine the quiet atmosphere inside a temple. Stone pillars rising, dim light, the smell of incense drifting through the air. The food is placed carefully on stone altars, not eaten by people, but symbolically consumed by gods. Later, priests or workers might eat the leftover offerings. Now, gently follow me into an Egyptian marketplace, a place full of life. Imagine it noisy, crowded, warm. Sellers call out, offering baskets of dates, jugs of oil, piles of onions, handfuls of herbs. Fishermen carry nets of fresh-caught fish, still glistening. Imagine women bargaining for prices. Children running between stalls. The air smells like fish, bread, dust, and river mud. It was here that families who didn't grow their own food came to buy essentials. Imagine someone carefully choosing a bundle of garlic, weighing it in their hand, feeling its sharp scent rise into their nose. Now picture meat, rare for ordinary people. Cows, goats, sheep, mostly for the wealthy. The poor might eat meat only on holidays or special occasions. Imagine a butcher slicing fresh goat meat in the market, the smell heavy in the air. That meat might be taken home, cooked slowly with onions, served to celebrate something important, maybe a child's birth, a wedding, or a festival. And as the day winds down, imagine families sitting outside in the cooling air, sharing a small evening bite while watching the sky turn from pink to deep purple. Food wasn't rushed. It wasn't extravagant. It was routine, grounding, tied deeply to nature and the Nile's rhythm. In the next batch, we'll float deeper into how different classes ate, how priests, soldiers, farmers, workers, and royalty experienced food in their own worlds, and what that says about life in ancient Egypt. For now, take a breath. Let the warm Egyptian night settle around you. Candles flickering, pots cooling, the river whispering its endless song. All right, breathe in softly. Let your eyelids relax just a little as we drift deeper into ancient Egypt again. The night is warm, the moon floats pale above the Nile, and we're slipping quietly into the world of classes. How food separated lives, shaped identity, and revealed the hidden layers of society. Every civilization has differences. But in ancient Egypt, food spoke quietly about who you were, how hard you worked, and what role you played in the long rhythm of the kingdom. So, let's begin with the farmers, the ones who felt the earth beneath their feet every day. Imagine their home again. Mud brick walls, a simple courtyard, a few clay jars stacked neatly in a corner. These families grew the wheat, the barley, the vegetables that fed the entire nation. Yet their meals were the simplest. Picture breakfast. Thick barley beer, a piece of bread, maybe an onion. Imagine a father chewing slowly, wiping sweat from his forehead even before the sun fully rises. He needs strength. He will dig irrigation channels, guide cattle across fields, harvest grain under the scorching sky. His lunch: lentils, onions, cucumbers, flatbread baked earlier in the morning. Sometimes dried fish if the Nile was generous. Imagine the crunch of a salted fish, The taste sharp but satisfying. Dinner. Leftover stew or bread softened in beer. By evening they are tired. The type of tiredness that makes even simple food feel comforting. And yet they carry pride. Because they know the kingdom depends on their hands. Now drift toward the craftsmen. The carpenters, potters, stonecutters, weavers. Imagine them working in small workshops that line the edges of towns. Their food is simple too, but slightly more varied when work is plentiful. A potter might eat bread and beans. A carpenter might enjoy fish stewed with onions if wages were good that week. Picture them sitting together during midday breaks, sharing bites of bread, dipping pieces into a communal bowl of lentils. Laughter in the dusty air. Small jokes between friends. Small comforts that make hard work lighter. Now shift your mind toward soldiers. Imagine ranks of men training in open fields, their bodies hardened by the heat, their arms strong from carrying spears and shields. Their food needed to sustain them, more protein, more bread, more beer. Imagine them eating roasted meat during campaigns, dried fish during marches, and plenty of bread to keep them full. Soldiers also received rations of beer, not as a treat, but as part of their daily requirement. Picture a camp at sunset. Torches flickering, men sitting around small fires, eating rough meals but with a sense of pride. Their food wasn't luxurious, but it was hearty, enough to face long battles or border patrol. And now, let's walk quietly into the world of priests. Here food takes on a different tone. Imagine the calm halls of a temple, the smell of incense drifting like thin clouds. Priests lived by strict rules. They shaved their heads, bathed multiple times a day, and followed dietary restrictions meant to keep them pure. Picture a priest eating bread made with care, drinking beer that was prepared cleanly, chewing lettuce, onions, herbs, simple foods, but chosen for ritual significance. Some foods, like fish, were avoided in certain temples. Imagine the quiet, measured way a priest eats, aware that food isn't just nourishment but part of spiritual duty. Now drift toward the homes of scribes, those who could read and write. An elite skill. Imagine a young scribe finishing his work for the day, wiping ink from his hands. His meals might include fresh bread, figs, grapes, cheese, cucumbers, stews with herbs. Not luxurious, but comfortable. Scribes often lived better than farmers, without the heavy physical labor. Picture him eating slowly in the shade, enjoying a little more variety, a little more leisure. And now, gently move with me into the world of nobles. The shift is noticeable. Imagine walking into a villa surrounded by gardens, the smell of flowers drifting in warm air. Servants move quietly through corridors carrying trays of food. Nobles could afford meat regularly. Beef, goat, goose, duck. Imagine a table with roasted birds glazed with honey, figs stuffed with nuts, grapes spilling from woven baskets. Picture them drinking wine, not beer, a symbol of wealth. Red wine, sweet wine, spiced wine. Imagine noblewomen tasting cheese, fruits, pastries made with dates and honey. Meals here lasted longer, accompanied by musicians, dancers, and conversation. The food of the wealthy wasn't extravagant by modern standards, but compared to the poor, it was a world of abundance. But now, take a deeper breath, because we're about to step into the most extraordinary space of all, the palace where the pharaoh lived. Imagine walking into enormous halls lined with columns painted in bright colors. The air feels cooler, shaded. Servants hurry silently, carrying bowls of fruit, jugs of wine, trays of bread shaped like animals, flowers, and pyramids. The pharaoh's meals could include the finest meats, beef from well-tended herds, geese raised specifically for the palace, fish caught at dawn and delivered fresh. Imagine the soft texture of roasted goose, flavored lightly with herbs. Imagine baskets of figs, dates, pomegranates in later periods, grapes, melons. The pharaoh drank wine from foreign vineyards, flavored with herbs and resins. Picture servants pouring it into beautiful cups decorated with gold or faience. But here's the calming, grounding truth. Even at the top of society, the core foods were still the same. bread, beer, vegetables, fish, fruit. The basic rhythm of Egypt didn't change. Only the variety and richness expanded. Food reflected order, structure, hierarchy, the same values that shaped Egyptian life. Now imagine the contrast. A poor family eating bread dipped in stew, and miles away, a royal feast full of performers and sweet pastries. Same country, same river, same sun. But different realities. And now, let's drift gently into the hidden world of food for the dead. Because the Egyptians did not just eat in life. They believed food followed them into eternity. Imagine servants preparing food offerings for tombs. Bread, beer, onions, dried fish, figs, jars of grain. These were placed carefully beside the dead so they would never hunger in the afterlife. Imagine the quiet respect. The belief that nourishment must continue beyond earthly life. And in the next batch, we'll drift deeper into farming cycles, tools, seasons, festivals connected to food, and how agriculture tied every Egyptian, rich or poor, to the land that fed them. For now, breathe softly. Imagine the moon over the Nile. The night breeze carrying the scent of bread and herbs from a dozen quiet homes. All right, settle your breath again. Let your shoulders loosen. Feel that slow drift back into ancient Egypt, where the Nile breathes like a giant living creature and every part of life, every meal, every harvest, every festival, follows its rhythm. In this batch, we move gently into the farming cycle, the true backbone of all food in Egypt. Because without the river, without its patient yearly dance, none of the bread, fish, dates, lentils, or beer could exist. Let the world fade into warm sunlight now. Imagine standing at the edge of the Nile during the ancient flood season. The air is heavy, humid. The river isn't calm. It rises, swelling, dark and full of silt coming from deep in Africa. Imagine watching the water climb slowly up the banks, covering fields that just months ago were dotted with crops. This season was called Akhe, the inundation. For ancient Egyptians, this wasn't a disaster. It was a blessing. Imagine families standing outside their homes, watching the water spread across the land. Children laugh, pointing at floating weeds. Adults breathe in relief, because the rising river means one thing: the land will be fertile again. Picture the black, rich mud, called kemet, settling onto the fields as the water recedes. It was like nature dropping a blanket of nutrients across the soil. Imagine your bare feet sinking into that mud, soft and cool, sticky between your toes. This mud was everything. It fed crops. Crops fed people, people fed gods and kings. Now the farming cycle begins. After the floodwaters shrink back, families step onto the fresh fields. Imagine farmers walking behind cattle, dragging a wooden plow through the mud. The plow isn't sharp or metallic. It's simple, carved from wood. The cattle snort and stomp, the mud splashing around their legs. The plow cuts through the soil just enough to make rows for seeds. This sowing season is called parate. Imagine the farmer bending down, scattering seeds, wheat, barley, flax. He throws them by hand, broadcasting them across the field. Sometimes his children help, laughing as they try to scatter evenly but miss spots. The seeds fall onto the mud, sink slightly, settle in. Then, farmers use animals to tread the seeds deeper into the ground. Imagine cows walking slowly, hooves pressing seeds into the earth. Life grows quietly. Now imagine the months passing, the sun warming the fields, rows of green shoots rising slowly. Wheat sways in the breeze like golden waves. Barley grows tall and bright. Imagine the rustling sound, like soft whispers of thousands of years breathing at once. Farmers tend to these plants constantly. They dig small irrigation channels using simple tools. These channels pull water from the Nile or nearby basins. Imagine the cool rush of water traveling through narrow dirt pathways, feeding thirsty plants. Without irrigation, everything would wither. Now settle into the third season, Shimu, the harvest. The fields are golden now. Imagine hundreds of farmers bending under the sun, sickles in their hands. The sickles are wooden handles wrapped with flint blades, sharp but fragile. Imagine the sound of cutting wheat, a crisp, rhythmic slicing, repeated across entire villages. They gather wheat into bundles, tie them with straw, and carry them to threshing floors. Flat, open spaces where animals walk in circles, trampling grain loose from the stalks. Imagine the sound of hooves thumping, the chaff flying in the air like soft golden dust. Women and children winnow the grain. They toss it into the air with wide baskets. The wind blows the lighter chaff away. The heavier grains fall back down. Imagine the feeling of grain raining softly between your fingers, warm from the sun. These grains become flour, bread, beer, offerings to the gods. This is the beginning of every Egyptian meal. Now picture flax, a tall, slender plant with blue flowers. Farmers harvest it for linen, but the seeds also produce oil. Imagine workers twisting flax fibers into thread, their hands moving in practiced rhythm. Imagine oil pressed from seeds dripping slowly into clay jars, precious for cooking and household use. And now, feel the presence of fruit trees. Date palms, fig trees, dum palms. These don't follow the exact same cycle as grains, but they depend on the Nile's nourishment too. Imagine farmers climbing palm trees to gather clusters of dates. Picture them drying dates in the sun, storing them for months. Imagine the sweet smell filling the warm air. The Nile's rhythm wasn't just seasonal. It shaped time, society, and beliefs. Egyptians even based their calendar on the river. Flood, growth, harvest. No Nile, no food. No food, no kingdom. Now step with me into the life of fishermen, because they too depended on the river's cycle. During the flood, fish multiplied rapidly in the expanding waters. Imagine nets cast wide, hauling in gleaming tilapia, catfish, mullet. Fishermen gutted and dried fish in the sun, storing them for seasons when the catch was leaner. Imagine the strong salty smell of drying fish along the riverbank. In richer households, fishermen delivered fresh fish daily. Imagine long reed boats gliding through quiet morning waters, nets dripping with silver scales. And as the river receded from flood to dry season, it left behind lakes and pools where fish became trapped, easy to catch. Imagine families gathering around shallow pools, children splashing, adults scooping fish with baskets. Everything was connected to water. Now imagine festivals tied to harvest, celebrations thanking gods for good crops. Picture people offering the first loaves of bread, jars of fresh beer, baskets of fruit. Priests performed rituals asking the Nile to rise again next year. Imagine crowds gathering outside temples, music playing, fires burning, the smell of roasted meat marking the rare joy of feast days. Even funerary texts spoke about the Nile's gift. Imagine reading ancient prayers carved into tomb walls, thanking the river for feeding the living and the dead. And now, move gently into the homes of farmers after a long harvest day. Imagine them sitting on mats as the sun sets, eating bread made from the very wheat they cut, dipping it into stew. Their fingers smell faintly of grain dust and earth. Their bodies ache, but their hearts are full, because harvest means survival. And just beyond them, imagine wealthy estate owners tallying grain in large storerooms. Scribes sit with pallets of ink, recording every sack. This grain becomes taxes, wages for workers, offerings for temples. The harvest wasn't just food. It was economy, power, stability. And in the next batch we'll drift into kitchens, cooking tools, firewood, ovens, pots, and how ancient Egyptians actually cooked all this food. Slowly, softly, the way their homes breathed warmth into every meal. For now, let your breath match the slow flow of the Nile in your imagination. Calm, steady, timeless. All right, settling back into that soft, slow, whisper-written rhythm. Let's continue, drifting even deeper into ancient Egypt's kitchens and quiet late evening meals. So just imagine yourself again wandering along the Nile bank, the air still warm but softened by the night breeze rolling over the dark water. The fields have already been harvested earlier in the season, and now, as you walk, you can almost hear the faint crunch of leftover stalks under your feet. The people of ancient Egypt were always thinking ahead, About planting, about flooding cycles, about storing food so their families could make it through difficult years. And in that quiet darkness you sense how much planning went into even the simplest meal. It wasn't just eating, it was survival, culture, habit, and tradition blending together. And in this batch, we drift into a very gentle but vivid look at how food reached the average household, especially because social class shaped nearly everything in ancient Egypt, including what ended up on dinner plates. For most people, regular farmers, laborers, craft workers, boatmen, dinner was simple. Very simple. If you were a commoner, your plate, night after night, would have looked almost identical. Bread, beer, maybe vegetables, maybe some onions or garlic, maybe lentils. And if it was a lucky day, a tiny bit of fish or leftover pigeon meat. The kitchens were small, usually attached to the courtyard, and the smell of smoke from clay ovens drifted across neighborhoods. Women ground grain on querns every single morning, kneeling for hours in a slow side-to-side motion, turning emmer wheat into coarse flour. The sound of grinding stones was basically the soundtrack of ancient Egypt, the background noise of the entire civilization. Just picture it. Generations of mothers and daughters grinding grain, rhythmically, endlessly. Some researchers say that women develop joint damage from these repetitive tasks, and that makes the food feel even more real, even more human, knowing that daily bread cost real physical effort. And that bread. Oh, the bread. It was dense, heavy, and full of ground stone particles that wore down teeth over a lifetime. If you ever see the skull of an ancient Egyptian, you'll notice the teeth are flattened like sanded down tiles, because their bread was full of grit. Eating wasn't always comfortable, but it was necessary. That rough texture, the chewiness, the earthy smell baked from simple mud brick ovens. Imagine breaking it open with your fingers, steam rising just a little, warm and grainy and simple. Beer played an equally important role, maybe even more important than water. Not because they were trying to get drunk, but because beer was safer than untreated river water. It was thick and nutritious, more like a drinkable porridge made from fermented bread. Even children drank weak beer because that was normal. And with all the hard labor, walking, lifting, farming, chiseling stone, rowing boats, weaving baskets, a full belly meant energy, and beer did that job very well. In the evenings, families gathered around small clay lamps fueled by animal fat or vegetable oil. Shadows flickered gently on plastered walls, and the smell of onions and crushed coriander floated in the air. The mother or grandmother might have been cooking in simple pots, simmering lentils, leeks, or beans. Sometimes there was a bit of oil added, sesame, linseed, or castor, but not too much because oil was expensive. Food for commoners was practical, nourishing, predictable. But the wealthy, oh, their tables were a different world altogether. Imagine stepping through a carved doorway into a nobleman's villa. Columns painted in bright colors, lotus patterns dancing around the pillars, and storage jars full of luxury ingredients. Nobles could afford honey, something the average farmer rarely tasted. They could afford more meat, beef, antelope, goat, mutton, duck, goose. Their kitchens smelled different, richer, fuller. There were house servants grinding spices, slicing figs, soaking barley, roasting birds, and arranging meals on low tables. They had access to fruits many commoners rarely saw: juicy dates, ripe grapes, watermelons, sycamore figs. And the elite had something else: time. Time to feast, time to host guests, time to enjoy music, dancers, perfumes. Eating for them wasn't only survival, it was culture, entertainment, status. Imagine a noble banquet. Trays of roasted goose glazed with honey, bowls of spiced beans, bread shaped in delicate molds, fresh cucumbers sliced thin, wine poured into clay cups. A harpist sitting in a corner plucking gentle chords while women with braided wigs laughed softly. Inscriptions and tomb paintings show us these scenes. You can practically smell the roasting meat and fermented grapes. But don't drift too far into luxury, because now we're moving back toward the people who made up the backbone of Egypt's population. Workers. Especially the special ones. The workers at Deir el-Medina, the crew that built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. These workers had a rare privilege by Egyptian standards. They weren't nobles, But they were not treated exactly like ordinary peasants either. They were paid in rations, not in coins, since ancient Egypt didn't use money the way later civilizations did. Rations included bread, beer, vegetables, fish, sometimes oil, sometimes salt, occasionally goat or pork. Their diets were monitored and recorded carefully. They worked long hours carving and painting tombs, so they needed steady food supplies. Imagine them sitting in small groups after work, tired, covered in dust and paint pigments, drinking beer from pottery cups while eating their rations. Food kept them alive, motivated, and able to build the king's eternal resting places. And speaking of the kings, they lived on another level entirely. Pharaohs had access to everything the land could produce. Luxury wines, rare imported foods, exotic spices from the Levant, figs from far regions, incense from Punt, thick honey cakes. Even the bread for royalty was refined differently. Their meat was the best cuts, their fruit was the best harvest, and their cooks were highly skilled. Eating was almost a ritual, because the pharaoh was seen not only as king, but as a god on earth. So even his meals carried symbolism, abundance, and the fragrance of wealth. But even as we drift between all these layers of society, the most powerful thing to remember is this. Egypt's diet stayed incredibly stable for thousands of years. Bread, beer, onions, garlic, vegetables, lentils, fish, fruits, and occasional meat. This basic structure barely changed from the Old Kingdom to the Late Period. You could take a farmer from 2500 BCE and drop him in 500 BCE, and he would recognize the food instantly. There's something calming in that. Something steady, reliable, almost timeless. And as night settles deeper into the Nile Valley, and the stars come out, bright and sharp in the dry sky, you can imagine all of Egypt settling into their evening meals. From the humblest mud hut to the grandest palace courtyard. Everyone eating something crafted from the same river, the same soil, the same sun-drenched fields. Let's pause here. The night's still warm, the kitchen's faintly glowing with lamp light. Alright, just settle in again. Breathe a little softer, and come back with me to that slow, warm, dusty world of ancient Egypt. The Nile is calmly whispering in the background as we drift into another layer of what people truly ate, how they prepared it, and how deeply food shaped their everyday rhythm. Let the images settle gently in your mind like sand drifting down inside an hourglass. Because now, in this batch, we begin sinking deeper into the routines behind food, the daily motions, the habits that turned ingredients into life. Not the dramatic celebrations, not the royal feasts, but the small, repetitive movements that every person would have recognized. The everyday patterns that filled their mornings, afternoons, and evenings for thousands of years. And again, imagine the soft crunch of sand under your feet as we walk into a typical household courtyard. Early morning, sunlight just beginning to heat the mud walls. You hear the scrape of grinding stones, that slow, patient rhythm, because grain grinding always began before anything else. Women knelt with legs tucked under them, pushing the upper stone forward and backward, shaping flour from emmer wheat. Their bodies rocked like a wave, a movement learned in childhood, repeated until old age. This was the core of Egyptian life, turning grain into something edible. And it wasn't just work. It was preparation for every meal. The flour they made would become dough for bread, thick mash for beer, or even small cakes. Every household smelled faintly of crushed grain. And as you picture this scene, imagine the sunlight hitting tiny dust particles in the air, making them glow as they drift. Next came lighting the clay oven, the taboon or the beehive-shaped bread oven. The fire was fed with straw, reeds, or dried animal dung, because wood was rare. Flames licked around the curved clay walls, slowly heating it until the inside glowed softly. Most Egyptians baked bread daily, because it spoiled quickly and was always needed. They used clay molds sometimes, shaping dough into tall, narrow loaves or small round ones. And imagine the moment when the bread was finally slapped onto the hot surface. A hiss of steam, a smell rising immediately. The bread wasn't soft like modern bread. It was dense and a little gritty. But it was nutrition. It was survival. It was comfort even. Nearby, A pot would be boiling over a small clay stove. Maybe lentils simmering, turning into a thick stew. Maybe chopped leeks softening in water, releasing that sharp, familiar aroma. Maybe fish, fresh if they lived close to the river, salted if they planned to store it. Fish was everywhere in Egypt. The Nile teemed with tilapia, catfish, mullet, Nile perch, eels. Some Egyptians dried fish in the sun, others smoked it lightly. Housewives might cut fish into strips and lay them on woven mats to dry, insects buzzing around as they shooed them away. And the vegetables, such a simple part of their diet but so defining. Onions, leeks, garlic. These three were almost sacred. Workers building the pyramids were given onions and garlic because they believed it strengthened their bodies. These flavors are so strong that you can practically smell them through history itself. If you were to walk into an ancient Egyptian kitchen, that would likely be the first scent hitting you. Sharp, earthy, unmistakable. For farmers, vegetables came straight from the fields or small family gardens. They grew lettuce, cucumbers, radishes, beans, chickpeas, lentils. And the rhythm of planting and harvesting shaped their months. Picture a man crouched in the soil, pushing seeds into the earth with the same movements his father and grandfather used. Picture a woman cutting a bunch of green onions with a small copper knife, the blades not sharp like modern ones, but enough to do the job. And then, the fruits. Oh, fruits were a gift of the Nile's seasons. Dates were the sweetest treat. Sticky, soft, and full of energy. Figs were sliced and dried in the sun on woven mats. Grapes were eaten fresh or turned into wine for the wealthy. Melons cooled the body during the hot season, their juice dripping down hands. Sycamore figs came from sacred trees, rough-skinned and less sweet, but deeply tied to Egyptian culture. Imagine walking into the marketplace now. Close your eyes a little and drift through it, the sounds, the smells. Sellers calling out in accents lost to time. Baskets overflowing with onions, jars filled with honey, pots of beer sealed with clay stoppers. Women bargaining softly, touching produce with careful fingers. A butcher chopping goat meat on a wooden block. A fisherman proudly displaying fresh catch from the morning, scales glistening. Children chasing each other, kicking up dust. Food wasn't sold in coins. It was traded, exchanged, rationed. Sometimes workers were paid in grain, large sacks of barley or emmer. Grain was wealth. Whoever had grain had security. Now let's follow a farmer back to his home at sunset. His hands rough from the fields, his back aching from bending over crops. He might wash his hands and feet in a small clay basin, the water cool from sitting in the shade all day. Dinner would be simple: bread, beer, onions, a bit of cooked beans or lentils. If he was lucky, fish. If he was very lucky, a piece of salted goat meat. He would sit on the ground or on a low stool. His wife would sit nearby, serving the food from clay bowls. Children would grab pieces of bread eagerly, dipping it into the stew. The family talked quietly, not loudly because the day was long and energy was precious. They discussed crops, neighbors, the rising or falling of the river, all while dipping bread into bowls and sipping thick beer. And picture a different scene. A temple kitchen, far more structured. Temple workers prepared food offerings daily. The gods were fed bread, meat, beer, fruit, and vegetables. Priests oversaw distribution. The food offered to gods was not wasted. After rituals, it was redistributed among staff. Temples were enormous food hubs, like spiritual kitchens feeding both gods and humans. And because temples owned land, they produced huge harvests. Food flowed through society like the Nile itself. Predictable, vital, soothing. But now, drift with me into something deeper. The symbolism of food. Ancient Egyptians believed food connected the living to the dead. Offerings placed in tombs were meant to nourish the deceased in the afterlife. That's why so many tomb paintings show food scenes. Bread being shaped, cattle being slaughtered, jars of beer lined in rows. It wasn't decoration. It was a magical guarantee that the dead would never go hungry. So when you see a loaf of bread drawn on a wall, Think of it not as art but as eternal nourishment. Imagine a soul reaching for it in the afterlife. Imagine the belief that eating continued forever. Let this batch settle softly into your mind. The scraping of grinding stones, the bubbling of a clay pot, the scent of onions, the quiet dinner scenes, the marketplaces, the rituals, all slowly blending into the steady heartbeat of ancient life. All right. Just ease back into that slow, warm, steady storytelling tone, like settling onto a soft cushion beside a glowing clay lamp. Let the world around you quiet down while we drift even deeper into ancient Egypt, where every meal, every grain of wheat, every cup of beer was tied to seasons, beliefs, and the rhythm of the Nile. Take a soft breath, and imagine yourself stepping back into that timeless landscape again. In this path, we wander into the seasonal flow of food, because what Egyptians ate didn't stay the same all year. Their diet rose and fell with the river, literally. The Nile's yearly flooding didn't just shape farming. It shaped taste, availability, and the mood of entire communities. Food was never just food. It was a reflection of the river's blessings or its unpredictability. So imagine this. The inundation season, called Ake, when the Nile swelled and spread across the black soil. During this season, farmland was underwater, so farmers couldn't plant. Instead, they repaired tools, cleaned canals, built walls, paid taxes in grain, and waited. And because farming paused, food became a matter of storage. This is when Egyptians dipped into their granaries. Tall mud brick silos full of grain, emmer wheat, barley, sealed against pests. Women would go to the granary, scoop grain with baskets, and carry it home balanced on their heads. The sound of grain shifting like dry sand running in waves. It was a daily soundtrack. During Ake, meals leaned heavily on stored food. Bread from last harvest's wheat. Beer brewed from stored grain. Dried fish. Dried dates. Onions braided and hung. Pulses stored in clay jars. Meat. Rare, unless a family slaughtered an animal for a festival. Imagine entire villages glowing gently with lamplight at night, eating simple meals while the river outside stretched across the land like a giant, dark mirror. The air was humid and warm. Frogs croaked. The smell of wet earth drifted in through open doorways. Then came Parate, the growing season. Here food changed again. Fresh vegetables appeared. The smell of newly cut green onions filled the markets. Farmers spent long hours tending fields, guiding water into irrigation channels. Children carried small baskets and helped weed. Women picked cucumbers and lettuce. The meals became more fresh, more crisp. Picture walking through a field at dawn during Parate. Dew sparkling on the crops, birds swooping low, the smell of damp soil. A farmer bends down to pull up a handful of radishes, wipes the dirt on his tunic, then bites into one. The peppery crunch wakes him up better than any modern coffee. For families, Parate meant fresh greens, fresh beans, young onions, crisp lettuce, herbs like coriander and dill. Still plenty of bread and beer, but more variety, more vibrance. And then Shimu, the harvest season. This was the time of abundance, the moment everyone waited for. The air was dry, hot, buzzing with cicadas. Fields golden with barley and wheat shimmered under the sun. Entire communities turned out for harvest. The reaping was rhythmic, almost musical, the sound of metal blades slicing stalks in long sweeping motions. Imagine the celebration in a family's home when the first sacks of fresh grain arrived. Women clapped softly. Children danced around. Grain wasn't just food, it was the year's security. Bread baked fresh from new grain had a special smell, slightly sweeter, richer. And with the harvest came more feasts. Temples held rituals giving thanks to gods for abundance. Farmers might slaughter a goat or a sheep if the harvest was good. There was laughter, music, extra beer, and tables full of roasted pigeons, fresh figs, honeyed cakes, melons chilled in water jars, wine for those who could afford it. Now drift with me into another part of the food world. Spices and seasonings. Egyptians didn't have chilies or tomatoes or modern peppers, but they seasoned their meals with herbs they grew themselves. Imagine the tiny bundles of cumin, coriander, fenugreek, dill, mint, salt from desert deposits. A mother grinding coriander seeds between stones, the smell warm and lemony. A cook sprinkling crushed cumin on fish before roasting it. A farmer chewing mint leaves to freshen his breath before visiting the market. These little details made simple meals feel alive. And now we drift into how ancient Egyptians preserved food. Because the hot climate demanded clever methods, salt was the greatest tool. They salted fish, salted meat, even salted vegetables sometimes. Drying food was equally important. Imagine rows of fish drying in the sun, their skins tightening as the heat shrank them. Farmers dried figs, dates, grapes. Women dried onions and garlic, then hung them from the rafters of their homes. Another method was fermentation. Beer was a fermented staple. Bread, too, was sometimes naturally fermented. Egyptians even fermented fish sauces, ancestors of the Mediterranean garum. Imagine a pottery jar sealed with mud, bubbling faintly inside from fermentation. Strong smells, intense flavors, but incredibly nutritious. And meat. Meat was rare for common people, so they preserved it carefully. When they could afford it, they roasted it, stewed it, or dried it. But the elite had access to fresh cuts anytime. Temples kept herds of cattle, goats, and sheep for offerings. These offerings, once ritually given, became food for priests. So, in a way, gods ate first, and humans ate afterward. Now drift with me into the kitchens of temple priests. Large courtyards full of clay ovens, huge pots bubbling with stew, lines of workers chopping vegetables, baskets of freshly baked bread stacked against the walls. Everything done in rhythmic motions, steady, methodical, almost ritualistic. They prepared meals for hundreds of staff daily. And in royal kitchens, luxury again. Delicate pastries, roasted gazelles, trays of figs sprinkled with honey, wines imported from the Levant. Imagine cooks carving roasted goose, its skin crackling, glaze dripping. Imagine servants carrying plates on polished boards, carefully balancing them as they walked over polished stone floors. The smell of incense mixed with roasted meat filled the halls. But even with these differences, all Egyptians, rich or poor, believed food was part of the divine cycle. Eating connected them to earth, river, gods, ancestors. And so now, I want you to imagine this simple but powerful picture. A family sitting on the floor of their mud brick home, the father tearing bread, the mother pouring beer, the children licking honey from their fingers. Outside, the Nile flows in its eternal rhythm. Above them, stars burn bright in the clear desert sky. The world is quiet, except for soft laughter and the sound of chewing. Let that image linger for just a moment. Alright. Drift with me once again into the long, warm, drowsy hush of ancient Egypt. The lamps are glowing low, clay ovens cooling, and we wander deeper into the textures, the smells, the movements that shaped how people actually lived through their food. Let's step now into a part of the ancient diet that was everywhere, every day, in every home, every village, every social class. Bread and beer, yes, but specifically the incredible variety behind them, the quiet science of their preparation, and the ways they shaped culture in ways we can still see carved in tomb walls today. So imagine yourself moving slowly through a cool storeroom. Tall jars line the mud brick walls. The air smells of flour, faint yeast, and something a little sweet. Grain sits in woven baskets, golden and dusty. And here began one of the most important crafts of ancient Egypt: bread making. We already talked about bread a little earlier, but now, we sink further into its world, because it wasn't just a food. It was medicine, offering, daily fuel, and sacred symbol all at once. Ancient Egyptians baked many shapes of bread: round loaves, tall conical loaves, flat discs, crescent shapes, triangular loaves, animal-shaped festival breads, small sweet cakes with fruit or honey. You can almost picture a woman kneading dough in a large, low clay bowl. Her fingers press into the warm, slightly sticky mixture of emmer flour and water. She pulls, folds, presses. The dough gives beneath her hands. Sometimes she adds a bit of salt. Maybe a handful of crushed dates if the family is lucky. Maybe some coriander seeds for flavor. The smell rises slowly as she works. Bread ovens were fired with straw and dried dung, which burned hot and fast. The baker had to work quickly, timing everything not with clocks but with instinct, with a feel of heat on the face, with a smell of clay warming, with a sound of fire crackling inside the oven mouth. And now the deeper truth. Their bread was not soft like ours. It was rough, full of tiny stone particles from the grinding process. Yet it sustained them more than anything else. And if you imagine breaking open a fresh loaf, steam drifting into the morning air, you feel just a little closer to that world. And then there was beer, the other half of daily nourishment. Close your eyes for a second and imagine the early stages of brewing. Women soaking old bread loaves in water, crumbling them into mush, adding barley mash, letting natural yeast begin its slow magic. The mixture fermented in large jars sealed with clay caps. The beer wasn't clear like today. It was cloudy, thick, nourishing, carried grains, vitamins, and calories. It was breakfast, lunch, and dinner for many. Children drank weak versions. Adults drank stronger. Workers received beer ration daily. Builders, field laborers, tomb artists, boatmen. Beer strengthened the body in ways water couldn't, because untreated river water was dangerous. Now imagine stepping into a brewery. Rows of jars quietly bubbling. Brewers using wooden paddles to stir. A warm, sour, earthy smell hangs thickly in the air. Jars are tilted slightly to allow fermentation gases to escape. Workers hum low songs as they shuffle through the clay floor. Everything slow, everything routine. Bread and beer were not just food. They were social glue. People shared loaves, passed cups, exchanged rations, and bonded over these simple staples. Now let yourself gently shift into another layer of food, meat and poultry. Something far more symbolic, more ritual-centered, more luxurious. Most common Egyptians rarely ate meat. Maybe a few times a month. Maybe even less. But poultry was more available. Imagine a courtyard where a woman is plucking feathers from a duck or goose. Her hands moving quickly, practiced from childhood. Goose fat melts beautifully when cooked, and wealthy households adored it. The smell of roasting goose was considered a treat, a holiday, a festival moment, a special occasion. Cattle, on the other hand, were wealth. A cow was not just meat, it was plowing power, milk, status. When a cow was slaughtered, it was almost always for a festival or temple offering. And the cuts of meat were not equal. Tomb paintings show priests dividing meat carefully, forelegs, ribs, liver, and recording each piece on wooden tablets. Imagine a temple feast day. The smell of roasting beef, thick and smoky, drifting through the air. Priests chanting. Workers carrying trays heavy with meat. Offerings piled before statues of gods. And later, redistributed to temple staff. Meat traveled from hands to altar to hands again. Always watched, always counted, always meaningful. And speaking of meaningful, now we drift into the world of dairy. Not as common as in other ancient cultures, but still present. Egyptians did not drink milk as much as we do, but they used it. They made a form of yogurt. They made soft cheeses and curds. They churned milk in skin bags to create something tangy and thick. Goats and cows gave milk mostly to children and for ceremonial foods. The taste was probably sour, earthy, fresh. Picture a woman pouring milk through a cloth to strain curds. The sun is rising behind her. A child stands close, dipping a finger into the fresh curd with excitement. Tiny moment. Real. And now drift with me into sweetness, the rarest pleasure. Honey was expensive. Only the wealthy or temples had it regularly. Honey was medicine, dessert, offering. It was placed in tombs, kept in sealed jars. Imagine bees buzzing around woven hives made from clay and straw. A beekeeper moves slowly, gently lifting a section of hive. Honey glistens in warm sunlight, thick, golden, glowing. Commoners relied on dates for sweetness, mashed into paste, boiled into syrup, eaten fresh or dried. Sometimes they mixed dates into bread dough, creating small sweet cakes children loved. Now slowly we move into the etiquette of eating, how people actually gathered for meals. Egyptians didn't sit at tall tables. Most ate seated on the ground or on small stools. Food was placed on low trays. Fingers were used more than spoons. Bread often served as both a dish and utensil. Dipping, scooping, folding. Families ate together quietly after long days of labor. Meals were not loud, not rushed. They were calm moments of relief. Imagine a family of 5. The father dipping bread into a bowl of beans. The mother breaking apart a fresh loaf. The oldest child sipping beer. The youngest chewing on a piece of date cake. The simplicity. The warmth. The soft conversations. Food wasn't just survival. It was comfort after exhausting work in the fields, on boats, in quarries, in workshops. Food soothed. Food restored. Now picture the same scene in a wealthier home. Servants bringing trays, wiping spills, pouring wine. Musicians might play softly during a feast. Harp, flute, hand drum. Bread flavored with herbs. Stews rich with meat. Bowls of figs. Jars of imported wine. Soft linen napkins. Yet even here the rhythm was slow, sensual, calming. Egyptian dining was never aggressive. It was peaceful, measured. Let all of these images flow through your mind gently. Bread baking, beer bubbling, ducks roasting, figs drying, milk curdling, honey dripping, families gathering. Alright, settle in again. Let that warm, slow breath move through your chest, because next part drifts us even deeper into the kitchens, fields, and quiet corners of ancient Egypt, where food wasn't only survival or taste. It was identity, belief, ritual, and habit all melted into one long river of tradition. And remember, keep imagining everything softly, like you're watching it through warm candlelight. So now, imagine yourself walking through a small, dusty village tucked close to the Nile. The air is dry but gentle tonight. A family gathers outside their simple home, sitting on woven mats. You hear the low hum of conversation, the crackle of small firewood, and the quiet thump of someone kneading dough. This is how evenings often sounded. Calm, rhythmic, repetitive. The type of sound that wraps around you and is the same every night for centuries. Tonight, they're preparing their basic evening meal, one that nearly every ancient Egyptian, farmer, fisherman, potter, servant, knew by heart. Thick, sour bread made from emmer wheat. A bowl of stewed lentils sprinkled with herbs. Maybe some sliced cucumbers and onions. And if the day had gone well, a tiny piece of salted fish or a smear of date syrup to add a little sweetness. Their diet wasn't complicated, but it was comforting, predictable, and tied completely to the land. The mother checks the dough. Its smell is slightly sour, slightly nutty, because naturally fermented bread was their norm. No packets of yeast, no quick-rise tricks. They depended on the living environment. Wild yeast drifting through the warm air would settle into the dough and bring it to life. Imagine that scent, earthy, ancient, the scent that every Egyptian from the Old Kingdom to the Ptolemaic era knew without even thinking about it. Generations all smelling the same bread, century after century. Nearby, an older woman crushes garlic and coriander using a stone mortar. The stone has been passed down through her family for 3 generations, maybe 4. It's chipped at the edges, worn completely smooth in the center, like a small river carved into stone from years of repetitive motion. The Egyptians used garlic not only for flavor, but for digestive health and even spiritual protection. Workers who built pyramids were given garlic and onions in their rations because people believed these foods strengthened the body and protected against illness. One of the children peels onions, eyes watering, nose running, but he keeps going because onions were everywhere in Egyptian meals. Fresh onions, dried onions, cooked onions, onions with salt, sliced with cucumbers, mashed into spreads, mixed into stews. And the way they believed onions symbolized eternity because of their layers made them spiritually important too. People were even buried with onions placed over their eyes. That's how serious onions were in this world. Their father returns now from the riverbank, carrying a small cloth pouch. Inside dried fish. Not fancy, not large, but valuable. Fish was incredibly common, especially for the lower classes who lived near the Nile. Catfish, tilapia, mullet. These were the everyday catches. Sometimes they were stewed, sometimes roasted, sometimes dried and stored for weeks. The smell was strong but familiar, the type of smell that stayed inside homes and on clothing. A normal smell for them. Something they no longer noticed. And while the family prepares dinner, something else is happening quietly. Insects gathering near the firelight, frogs croaking from the marshy river edges, the distant quiet splash of someone casting a net. All of this is part of the rhythm of food in ancient Egypt. Everything depended on the Nile. Without it, no wheat, no barley, no beer, no fruit trees, no fish. Every bite they took reminded them that the river was life. As the pot of lentils simmers over the low fire, the mother adds cumin. Egyptians adored cumin. Flavored stews, bread, vegetables, meats. Everything. Another pinch of sesame. A bit of crushed salt. Their salt didn't come from the sea around them. It came from salty lakes in the north, from evaporated ponds, from trade. It was precious. They used it to preserve fish and meat. And it kept food edible for long periods, which mattered during dry seasons. The older woman lifts the clay pot lid and gives the stewed lentils a stir. The thick, earthy aroma rises upward. It's the type of smell that would make tired workers sigh with relief the moment they returned home. Food didn't need to be fancy, just warm, filling, predictable. In the corner, the youngest child mashes dates with a stone pestle, mixing them with a tiny amount of water to make a thick paste. Date paste was one of ancient Egypt's natural sweeteners. Not candy. Not dessert. But sweetness in a world where sugar didn't exist. Dates were everywhere. Fresh dates, dried dates, mashed dates, fermented date drinks. One of their primary fruits after figs and grapes. The father uses a knife shaped from bronze to slice a few cucumbers. Egyptians loved cucumbers. Cool, watery, refreshing. They balanced the warmth of bread and stews. Cucumbers were eaten raw, mixed with vinegar, paired with onions, added to simple salads. And their crunch. Imagine the way it sounded in a quiet, warm night like this. Gentle, crisp, grounding. As the meal comes together, the family begins to laugh softly. The fire crackles. The stars reflect on the slow-moving Nile. And something almost invisible begins to happen. A tiny ritual, repeated every single day. They gather not just to eat, but to reconnect with each other and with the river that sustained them. Food wasn't rushed. It wasn't eaten on the go. Meals were slower, quieter, warmer. Now imagine another household, many miles away. A wealthier home. A home with servants, storerooms, and a much larger kitchen. Their evening meal might include roasted goose, seasoned with salt and herbs. Or perhaps grilled quail. Maybe a small portion of beef, rare and expensive. Or fresh fruits like pomegranates and grapes. They might have honey. Golden, thick, luxurious. Honey was priceless. Only wealthier families used it often. Honey cakes, honey-sweetened beer, honey drizzled over fruit. But even for them, the foundation of the diet remained the same. Bread, vegetables, beer, herbs. Rich or poor, the basics of Egypt's cuisine tied everyone to the land. The difference was only in the extra luxuries. Picture the wealthy kitchen. Clay ovens burning hot, brass utensils gleaming near firelight, servants grinding spices like cinnamon and fenugreek imported from far regions. A scribe sitting nearby, writing down grain quantities or calculating food taxes. Because food wasn't just culture, it was economy. Entire record-keeping systems revolved around grain storage, grain distribution, grain taxation. Bread and beer didn't just feed the population. They powered the entire government. But return your mind now to the quiet, simpler home. Their food is ready. The family gathers around the mat. Bread is broken and passed by hand. No plates, no individual servings. Just one shared pot, one shared life. They dip bread into lentils, take small bites of dried fish, scoop onions, Taste the cool crunch of cucumbers. The rhythm of eating is slow, relaxed. And while they eat, they listen for something soft. The gentle swell of the Nile against the riverbank. Because tomorrow they'll depend on it again. Everything they eat, everything they plant, everything they store, starts with that slow, powerful river. The meal ends, the fire dims. The children curl up in blankets woven from flax fibers. The parents speak quietly about the next day, the next planting cycle, the coming floods. And in the darkness, the last scents of the meal, garlic, cumin, warm lentils, fade into the air. That is how food guided their evenings. Not loud, not dramatic, just peaceful, dependable, ancient. All right, let your shoulders fall. Loosen your jaw just a little. Feel your breath slow down again as we drift deeper into ancient Egypt's quiet world of food, habits, rituals, and the soft everyday life that once unfolded along the Nile. Tonight, imagine yourself stepping into the early morning before the sun has fully risen. A pale, bluish light spreads across the horizon. The air is cool for a brief moment, the only time of day when the desert gives a small sigh of relief. And in this soft, muted light, the sounds of life begin again. Slow, steady, predictable. Farmer wakes first. His home is simple. Mud brick walls, a straw roof, floors made of packed earth. But the air inside carries the familiar scent of last night's embers and a faint aroma of bread dough waiting to be baked. His wife had mixed it the evening before, letting it ferment overnight in a clay bowl covered with woven cloth. Natural yeast doesn't care what century it is. It always rises in its own rhythm, creating that slightly tangy scent that filled every Egyptian home for thousands of years. He takes a slow breath, steps outside, and feels the cool ground beneath his feet. The first task of the morning. Check the grains stored for the day's meals. Emmer wheat and barley sit inside large clay jars sealed with mud and straw. Grain wasn't just food, it was security. Without it, families starved, villages collapsed, temples couldn't function. Every jar of grain represented survival, hope, and tomorrow. He removes a small lid and scoops out a handful of barley. The grains are rough, uneven, and dusty. Barley was cheaper than emmer wheat, more resistant to harsh conditions, and often used for beer, the drink that everyone consumed. Beer in ancient Egypt wasn't like modern beer. It was thick, nutritious, closer to a liquid grain porridge than an alcoholic beverage. Children drank it, the elderly drank it, laborers drank it. It was calories, hydration, and comfort in one humble cup. Inside the kitchen space, really just a shaded corner near the courtyard, the farmer's wife crushes dried herbs with slow, practiced movements. The stone grinding tool makes a soft scraping sound. She adds a little salt, some ground coriander, and dried mint. These herbs weren't luxuries, they were essential. They made bland food flavorful and helped digestion. Egyptians believed herbs protected the body and balanced the heat of the desert sun. Her daughter helps by bringing in a small basket of figs and dates. The fruits still cling to trace sand from the ground where they fell. She wipes them with a cloth, sorting the soft ones from the firm ones. Fresh figs bruise easily, so they eat those quickly. The firmer figs will be dried in the sun, stacked on reed mats until they become chewy, sweet, and long-lasting. Dates, however, are everywhere. Their sweetness was a blessing, a steady source of energy that could be preserved for months. The sun approaches with a clay cup of water from a nearby well. The water is cool, a little cloudy, but drinkable. Egyptians often flavored their water with herbs, or even fermented it lightly to make it safer. A small splash of sour beer sometimes made the water more palatable. The wife kneads the dough again, forming small loaves. She sprinkles a bit of barley flour on top and shapes the dough into thick, rounded discs. These will bake in a clay oven heated by dried Nile reeds and leftover stalks from the fields. The oven, dome-shaped with a small opening at the front, holds heat incredibly well. As she slides the first piece inside, the smell begins to drift outward, warm, tangy, ancient. The farmer returns from the fields with a small bundle of green onions he picked near the irrigation channels. Green onions were everywhere in Egyptian meals. Pungent, sharp, energizing. Their scent fills the entire courtyard as he chops them into a bowl. Nearby, an elderly grandmother sits weaving baskets. She doesn't cook much anymore, but she watches everything with quiet eyes. She remembers years of floods, good ones and bad ones. When the Nile flooded just the right amount, fields thrived. When it didn't, hunger crept into homes. Food for her generation and every generation before was something to cherish, to respect, to use wisely. The family gathers for their morning meal. Fresh bread still warm from the oven, a bowl of green onions and cucumbers, a small dish of date paste, and thick beer served in clay cups. They eat slowly, tearing bread with their hands, dipping pieces into the onions or spreading crushed dates on top. The beer is slightly sour, slightly sweet, thick enough to leave a film on the tongue. As they eat, the sun begins to rise fully, casting a golden glow across the mud brick walls. The river sparkles in the distance. Birds call. Donkey brays. And breakfast, simple, ancient, predictable, fuels another day of labor. Far away, in a wealthier household, breakfast looks different. Servants prepare platters of fresh fruits, grapes, pomegranates, figs, arranged carefully on polished pottery. Cheese made from cow or goat milk sits in small, soft white blocks. Wealthier families sometimes ate honey drizzled over bread, a luxury almost unimaginable for common farmers. There might even be leftover meat from the previous day, roasted goose, duck, or pieces of lamb flavored with imported spices. Yet even in these homes, bread remains central. No one escapes bread. It is the heartbeat of Egyptian food. As the morning fades into midday, the air grows hotter. Farmers leave the shade and step into the bright fields where wheat waves gently in the breeze. The rhythm of harvesting is almost like a chant. Cut, gather, tie, stack. Sweat drips, insects buzz, reeds rustle. Food doesn't come easily. Comes from hours of bending, lifting, sweating, waiting. Every loaf of bread is the result of someone's sore back and dusty hands. In the distance, fishermen cast nets into the Nile. The water splashes softly as nets sink and rise again, shimmering with silver fish. Fish is plentiful during most seasons. Workers carry baskets filled with tilapia and catfish, the scales glinting under the sun. These fish are taken to markets, temples, and homes. Some will be cooked fresh, grilled or stewed with herbs. Others will be salted and dried on racks, preserved for long journeys or lean times. Later in the day, women gather in communal spaces to prepare foods that require more time. Lentil stews, bean porridges, roasted vegetables. They sit together talking about family, weather, the upcoming festival at the temple. Food preparation wasn't just work. It was bonding, storytelling, passing down knowledge. Every recipe was older than the person cooking it. The grandmother tells the children a story about how the gods themselves taught humans to cultivate grain. In her soft, wavering voice, she explains how the Nile's gift of silt made the land fertile, how people must honor their food by wasting nothing. The children listen with wide eyes, absorbing tradition through quiet repetition. In the evening, under the fading orange light, dinner is prepared. A pot of lentils cooks slowly over fire. Bread from the morning is reheated. Cucumbers are sliced. A little fish is added if the day was fortunate. The family gathers again on woven mats. No rush, no noise. Just soft chewing, shared glances, small smiles, and the steady comfort of warm food in a warm night. Their world is simple, but full. Predictable, but sacred. Nourishment wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, cultural. Every meal was a link in a chain stretching back millennia. And as the stars appear, the family rests with full stomachs, letting the night settle around them like a blanket woven from quiet and tradition. All right, take one slow breath, feel the warmth in your chest, and let yourself drift back again into that soft, slow-moving world along the Nile, where every sound is gentle, every movement unhurried, and every meal ties people to the land, the river, and the rhythm of life itself. Imagine the sky deepening into afternoon light. Not sunset yet, but that heavy warm time when the sun hangs overhead like a silent guardian. The air shimmers faintly in the distance. Dust swirls lazily with each footstep. This is the hour when most work pauses. Not completely, but enough for people to gather under shade, drink, rest, and prepare small afternoon meals. A group of workers sits under a cluster of date palms. Their hands are rough from gripping tools. Their backs ache from bending in the fields. But now, they share a simple, familiar snack. Bread softened with water or beer, a handful of dates, maybe a few slices of onions. Nothing heavy. Just enough energy to get them through the afternoon. The workers talk about the level of the Nile this year, whether the flood was strong or weak, whether the soil will be rich or thin. This conversation repeats every year like a ritual. Everyone's life revolves around that single cycle. Planting, harvesting, storing, waiting. And because of that, food always carries a whisper of uncertainty. Will the grain last? Will the fish be plentiful? Will the dates ripen properly? And yet the Egyptians developed ways to stretch every resource. One man pulls out a small piece of dried fish wrapped tightly in palm fibers. It's salty, intensely flavored, preserved months ago during a good season. The smell is sharp, but he shares it gladly. Food, even the smallest bite, is shared generously. It's how they strengthen bonds. How they reassure each other that survival is easier together. Nearby, a woman sits with a large clay bowl filled with crushed chickpeas. She mixes them with garlic and herbs to form a thick paste. Though not exactly like modern recipes, ancient Egyptians had versions of seasoned mashed beans. Simple, hearty, full of protein. She works slowly, patiently, shaping the mixture into small portions to be eaten later with bread. Her hands move in a calm, repetitive rhythm that has been learned from her mother, and her mother before her. Techniques passed down quietly, without written recipes. These recipes live inside people, not on papyrus. In wealthier households at this time of day, servants carry large platters filled with food left over from morning preparations. Slices of roasted fowl, small bowls of cheese, figs arranged in patterns, sometimes a bit of honey glazing their surfaces. A scribe sits in the shade, holding a damp piece of clay where he records the amount of grain distributed earlier that day. Food is counted, weighed, taxed. You can almost hear the soft tapping of his reed stylus as he writes the symbols. In the corner of the courtyard, a young apprentice tends a small garden. Wealthy homes often had cultivated gardens filled with herbs, lettuce, radishes, and fruit trees. The boy waters the soil carefully, making sure not to waste a drop. Water was life, and life was food, and wasting water meant disrespecting the land. The smell of crushed mint floats upward with each brush of his fingers. Egyptian gardens weren't just practical, they were peaceful. The sound of trickling water from a small pool, the rustling of papyrus plants, the soft hum of insects created a calming sanctuary in the heat of the day. Now drift your mind back to the riverbank. A line of fishermen repairs nets, tying knots with slow precision. A few meters away, a woman cleans fish on a flat stone, scraping each side methodically. The scales glimmer in the sun before falling to the ground like silver flakes. She guts the fish, washes them in the river, then lays them on reed mats to dry. The smell is strong but expected. This is how fish becomes food that lasts, not for days but for months. Children nearby gather lotus roots and lotus seeds from the marshy edges. The lotus plant wasn't only symbolic or decorative, it was food. The seeds could be eaten raw or roasted, and the roots boiled into soups. The children laugh softly as they pull the long stems from the water, droplets sparkling as they shake them off. Even playtime in ancient Egypt often involved gathering edible plants. Inside a temple kitchen, priests supervise the preparation of food offerings. Bread, vegetables, fruits, and sometimes small portions of meat are arranged neatly in baskets. These offerings aren't eaten by the gods, they're eaten by temple workers after the rituals. But preparing them is an act of devotion, done with care. The kitchen smells of incense mixed with the aroma of fresh bread. You can almost visualize the flickering torchlight illuminating rows of clay pots. Later, the afternoon passes into early evening, and the world cools slightly. People move more easily now. Women return to their homes to begin preparing dinner. They gather vegetables, leeks, garlic, lettuce, radishes, and wash them in bowls of fresh water. A pot of lentils is set to cook again, because lentils were a staple nearly every day. Someone adds crushed sesame seeds for richness. Another sprinkles ground fenugreek. A mother teaches her daughter how to season a stew correctly. She guides her hand as they drop coriander seeds into the pot. She explains how too much salt spoils the balance, how too few herbs leave the stew tasting empty. Teaching cooking wasn't just passing knowledge, it was shaping identity. A well-prepared meal was a sign of care, skill, and love. Old men sit outside their homes sipping beer from clay cups. They talk about the taste, some stronger, some weaker depending on the batch. Beer quality varied wildly because fermentation wasn't precise. But every batch contained the same ancient ingredients: grains, yeast, water, patience. The old men joke lightly about which tavern makes the best brew. Their voices are calm, dry like the wind, but warm with familiarity. As the evening deepens, shadows stretch across courtyards. Meals become more elaborate, depending on what families can afford. Poorer homes stick to the essentials: bread, lentils, onions, vegetables, maybe an egg if the household keeps chickens. Wealthier homes serve meat more often. Goose, duck, and even beef appear on their tables. Foods that took more time, land, and animals to produce. The smell of roasting goose rises from one home. The meat sizzles, the fat drips into the fire, creating tiny bursts of sparks. The cook brushes the bird with herbs crushed into oil. Small luxury. But even this extravagant meal will be eaten with bread. Bread never leaves their table. Children run about, eager to eat. One boy steals a fig from a basket and bites into it, the sweetness spilling onto his lips. His mother pretends not to notice. It is a small joy she allows him, because fruit ripens so quickly here that it must be eaten fast. And figs, soft, sweet, earthy, were one of the highlights of Egyptian diets. And then, almost silently, the first stars appear. The day fades gently, not abruptly. The light softens, the air cools, the world slows down. Families gather. Dews simmer. Bread is torn apart. Conversation becomes softer, more reflective. This is how food shaped their evenings. Slowly, warmly, predictably. Like a river that always returns, always nourishes, always carries life forward. All right, breathe in slowly. Let your shoulders drop, and settle into that soft, dusty warmth of another Egyptian evening as we drift deeper into the ancient rhythms of food, life, and quiet routines shaped by thousands of years along the Nile. Let everything around you fade, and picture only the slow-moving world we're stepping back into. As night begins to rise again, imagine walking through a small village just after the sun has slipped behind the low, golden horizon. The light is fading, but the heat still lingers in the air, clinging to the mud brick walls. A single torch flickers outside a doorway. Pot simmers somewhere. Child laughs in the distance. This is when families prepare their final meal of the day, the meal that closes the evening and opens the night. Inside one home, the mother stirs a pot of lentils on low fire. She stirs slowly, not in a rush, because lentils take time to soften, and time is not something ancient Egyptians hurried through. Her eldest daughter brings bowls made from fired clay, their surfaces uneven but smooth where hands have touched them for years. She sets them down gently, creating a quiet clinking sound that echoes faintly against the earthen walls. Her younger brother crushes garlic with a stone pestle. The smell rises sharply, strong, familiar, comforting. Garlic was food, but also medicine, protection, vitality. Egyptians believed it strengthened the body, so workers, soldiers, farmers, even children consumed it regularly. They loved its intensity. The father arrives with a basket of vegetables, turnips, leeks, and a few leafy greens grown in fertile flood soil. He wipes his forehead with the back of his arm and sighs, tired but calm. Farming wasn't just labor. It was the foundation of the family's survival, the backbone of the entire kingdom. Everything he brought home represented hours under a hot sun, bending, cutting, tying, lifting. Each vegetable in that basket came with effort carved into its skin. The mother sorts through the vegetables, rinses them in a bowl of well water, and adds them to the lentils. The pot hisses softly as juice meets heat. She adds cumin, the spice that seems to live in every Egyptian pot, and a pinch of ground coriander. These spices weren't rare or fancy. They were everyday companions. They made simple food taste familiar, warm, and alive. Next door, in another home, a woman prepares a small amount of meat, a rare treat. It's a piece of goose left over from a recent festival. She slices it thin, cooks it quickly with garlic and onions. The smell rises into the air, drifting through tiny cracks in the mud walls. Neighbors notice, not with envy but recognition. Meat isn't common tonight, but everyone knows that someday soon, another home will be the one with extra food. Sharing was how people stayed alive. In wealthier households, the evening meal is more elaborate. Servants carry dishes of roasted duck, bowls of stewed vegetables, fresh cheese, figs arranged carefully on clay plates. There might even be a small portion of leftover beef, extremely expensive, reserved mostly for priests and the elite. The smell of honey on warm bread drifts from one side of the courtyard as a servant brushes thick, amber honey onto freshly baked loaves. In the background, musicians practice quiet melodies on flutes and harps. The entire scene feels calm, controlled, rich with luxury. But back in smaller homes, the heartbeat of Egypt, food is simpler. Bread, lentils, beer, vegetables. Yet there's something sacred in the simplicity. Bread is torn into pieces and handed around. Children dip it into the stew. Adults sip slowly from cups of thick beer. The beer is warm, slightly sour, but deeply nourishing. It fills the stomach in a way water cannot. It's not indulgence, it's necessity. Calories, hydration, comfort. Nearby, a grandmother sits with a basket of dried dates, sorting them carefully. She picks out the ones that have split open, because those will spoil first. The rest go into a pile for storage. Dates were one of the sweetest gifts of the desert, energy packed into tiny, chewy, long-lasting fruit. Egyptians relied on them in every season, especially during long days of labor. As she works, she tells old stories about the gods, the floods, the years when food was scarce, and the years when the Nile overflowed generously. The children listen with wide eyes. These stories aren't entertainment. They're lessons. They teach respect for the earth, the river, the harvest. They teach gratitude for every meal, no matter how small. Farther along the village path, a group of men gather near a small tavern. The tavern smells of warm grains, yeast, and the faint bitterness of brewing. They drink beer from clay cups, discussing the upcoming harvest, the quality of wheat this year, and rumors from distant towns. Beer connects them. It loosens the stiffness in their bodies after long hours of work. It keeps them hydrated, energized, and grounded. The tavern keeper, an older man with a calm presence, stirs another large batch in a clay vat. Brewing isn't precise. It's instinct. He knows the right thickness by the way the mixture moves when he stirs. The right smell by how the yeast settles overnight. Every brewer has their own style, their own secrets. Some add dates, some add spices, some ferment longer. Beer is as varied as the people who drink it. Meanwhile, along the riverbank, fishermen return from a long day. They unload baskets of fresh fish, tilapia with shimmering scales, catfish with whisker-like barbels, mullet with sleek bodies. The fish slap softly against each other as baskets are lowered onto the ground. Some will be eaten fresh tonight. Others will be salted and laid out to dry in the desert heat tomorrow morning. The smell of fresh fish mixes with the earthy scent of river mud. This smell is ordinary to them, a sign of livelihood. As the night deepens, families finish their meals. The last bits of bread are eaten. The stew pot is scraped clean. Children lie on woven mats. Parents talk in low voices about the next day. Irrigation, harvesting, grinding grain, repairing tools. Food has fueled their bodies. Now quiet fills their minds. Soft wind blows through narrow alleyways. A few torches burn low, flickering shadows against walls. The Nile glistens under moonlight, calm and steady. This river, this giver of food, rests for a moment too. In a wealthier home, musicians begin to play. Flutes, harps, soft rhythmic clapping. Sound drifts gently through garden courtyards filled with papyrus plants and lotus flowers. Servants quietly clean up leftover food, storing fruits in cool rooms, covering bowls with linen cloth. A priest visiting the household thanks his hosts, praising the quality of the bread, because even in wealthy homes, the taste of the bread mattered more than the taste of the meat. Bread is identity. Bread is wealth. Bread is life. The night grows quieter. Most of the village drifts toward sleep. The last embers in cooking fires glow like tiny red eyes. The air cools gently. Someone closes a wooden door. Someone yawns. Someone finishes a final sip of beer. And as stillness fills the world, the smells of the day, onions, garlic, herbs, baking bread, fish, slowly fade into the warm darkness. Tomorrow, the entire cycle will repeat again. Different moments, same rhythm. Food is the clock, the heartbeat, the anchor holding everything steady in a world ruled by seasons and floods. The night inside the ancient Egyptian village grows cooler, and the warm scent of earth drifts upward as the farmers settle after a long day, their bodies tired but their minds calm with the quiet rhythm of routine. You can almost hear the distant croak of frogs along the canal and the soft crackling of small hearth fires being rekindled for the evening meal. Even in these simple moments, what they choose to eat reveals an entire world of customs, social structures, and deeply rooted traditions that shaped how this civilization lived for thousands of years. Imagine them now, seated on woven mats, their families close, passing around simple clay dishes filled with foods their ancestors also enjoyed. The most common evening plate remains bread and beer, the unshakable pair that fed laborers, scribes, nobles, and even pharaohs. But during nighttime meals, vegetables played a quieter, gentler role in soothing tired stomachs. Lentils simmered until soft were ladled into bowls, forming a warm, earthy paste. Onions, chopped raw, added a sting that cleared the nose and pinched the tongue. Cucumbers sliced long and narrow soothed the heat of the day, offering a cooling bite that felt refreshing even without refrigeration. Some of the wealthier households added garlic minced spreads, mixed with oil extracted from radish seeds or sesame. A richer home might even add a drizzle of expensive imported olive oil, though olives themselves weren't native and required significant costs to transport along the Mediterranean routes. When olive oil did appear in Egypt, it marked a special moment, a reminder of distant lands and wealthy connections. But for most families, simpler pressed oils carried their meals, and still, they felt luxurious compared to the scarcity the desert landscape could impose. Children sat nearest the hearth, dipping pieces of soft bread interior, crumbs warm and spongy, into bowls of lentil mash or thickened barley porridge. Their mothers reminded them to chew slowly, savoring each bite, since these meals were not rushed. Egyptians believed in balance, in eating in moderation, in respecting the body as a vessel that must remain strong enough for labor and ritual. So they ate calmly, gratefully, with a softness in their movements that matched the unhurried evening around them. Sometimes fish accompanied their meals, since the Nile, with all its generosity, provided richly. Yet nighttime wasn't typically dominated by heavy dishes unless a festival or a significant household event was happening. Catfish and Nile perch were the most common species, often seasoned with salt or dried herbs. These fish, when dried in the sun or salted heavily, became shelf-stable and could be kept for days. Egyptians mastered these preservation methods early, making it possible to serve fish even when fresh catches weren't available at the moment. Close your eyes and picture an older man, perhaps a grandfather, turning a strip of dried fish in his hands, its texture firm, slightly leathery, and carrying the subtle scent of the river. He tears off a small piece, chews thoughtfully, and nods with satisfaction. For him, this flavor is home. For his grandchildren, it's a reminder of the river's cycles and the importance of harmony between human labor and natural floods. Fruit made its appearance more during the daytime, but sometimes figs and dates still found their way into the evening, especially for older adults who preferred softer, easier-to-chew foods. Figs, with their tiny seeds and honey-like sweetness, were not just a treat but a vital source of energy. Dates, meanwhile, were eaten in many forms: fresh, dried, or mashed into pastes to sweeten dishes. These sweet fruits also reflected the Nile Valley's bounty, since the palms grew strong under the sun and rich soils. Even though these foods sound simple today, for the ancient Egyptians, each ingredient carried meaning. The meals were tied to the land's rhythms: the rising floods, the retreating waters, the harvest seasons, and the unchanging sun. Nothing was random. Even the spices they used were shaped by trade routes, availability, and tradition. One of the more fascinating elements of their diet was how they approached flavoring. Salt was used heavily, but not just for taste. It acted as a preservative. Coriander, cumin, and fenugreek were among the most common seasonings, filling kitchens with warm, earthy scents. A woman stirring lentils over a hearth, adding a pinch of ground coriander, might be using the very same herbs her ancestors used generations before her. Flavor, in ancient Egypt, wasn't only about pleasure, it was continuity. Meanwhile, wealthier households during the evening meal might include small amounts of meat, though even for them, it wasn't an everyday luxury. Beef, goat, and mutton were consumed, but sparingly, often reserved for events, offerings, or times of celebration. Poultry was somewhat more available, with ducks and geese being common around households that had access to ample land and water. But again, the evening meal leaned light, perhaps leftovers from earlier in the day, carved thin and served alongside bread and vegetables. Eating heavy at night wasn't particularly common. Picture the torchlight flickering across the walls of a wealthier home, illuminating painted scenes showing servants delivering trays of roasted goose or skewered pieces of cooked meat. These murals weren't fantasy. They depicted real culinary possibilities, but not for everyone. For the majority of Egyptians, the only meat they might see regularly came from offerings during religious festivals, where animals were slaughtered for the gods, and then portions were distributed among the temple workers and the public. Yet, even with all the differences between classes, one powerful thing unified them: the experience of sitting together at dusk, sharing food, talking softly, unwinding from the heat and brightness of the day. Families told stories of ancestors, recited familiar sayings, sang little songs, and laughed gently at the mischief of children. The soothing quiet of the nighttime meal was part of Egyptian life, predictable, grounded, and comforting. Inside every home, from the mud brick houses of farmers to the decorated estates of scribes or officials, the sounds were similar: the tearing of bread, the clink of pottery, the occasional splash of water being poured from one vessel to another. The rhythm of eating mirrored the rhythm of the Nile: steady, nourishing, repetitive, and vital. If you listen closely in your imagination, you might even hear the soft sighing of the breeze outside, carrying with it the smell of damp earth from the riverbanks and the lingering perfume of crushed herbs from the evening cooking. These details paint a living picture of their world, not grand or dramatic, but incredibly real and profoundly human. As the warm night deepens over ancient Egypt, the world beyond the small mud brick homes grows quiet enough that each little sound inside becomes clearer: the gentle tapping of pottery lids, the scrape of a wooden spoon, the soft shifting of mats as families settle more comfortably. In the dim light cast by flickering oil lamps, these evening meals continue to unfold with a simplicity that hides centuries of tradition beneath each bite. Families often prolonged these meals, not because of abundance but because of the gentle comfort they brought. Meals weren't rushed. They carried a slow, steady rhythm, where each piece of bread broken, each sip of beer taken, served as both nourishment and reassurance. The Egyptians lived in a land where the desert constantly reminded them of its power, so everything that came from the Nile felt precious. Every crop, every fish, every grain. Their food wasn't just sustenance. It was gratitude transformed into routine. You can picture parents encouraging their children to eat their lentils or onions, gently pressing pieces of bread into their hands. These children didn't complain about vegetables or simple meals. For them, onions were a daily presence, garlic a familiar sharpness, cucumbers a refreshing bite. These staples created the backbone of their diet in a way that shaped their palates from early childhood. Even travelers from foreign lands often commented on how much garlic Egyptians consumed, noting its strong smell and powerful taste lingering in their cooking. Barley and emmer wheat, the two grains that dominated their lives, continued to appear not only in bread and beer but in porridges thick enough to stand a spoon upright. These porridges formed a soft, comforting meal for the elderly, the young, and anyone exhausted from labor. Mixed sometimes with honey or date syrup when available, they tasted slightly sweet and deeply earthy, filling the stomach without burdening it. Families relied on porridges especially during times when the harvests were uncertain or the labor demanded more energy. The presence of dates in their meals cannot be overstated. Egyptians loved dates not only for their sweetness but for their convenience. They traveled well, dried easily, and stored without spoiling quickly. In the evening, when the heat softened and the air cooled, a small bowl of dates was often passed around as a gentle dessert. The natural sugars lifted tired spirits and renewed energy at the end of long days. Dates could be mashed into pastes, used to sweeten bread dough, blended into beer mixtures, or eaten plain. Their versatility made them a treasure in Egyptian households. Figs too played their own role. Plump, sticky, and floral in flavor, they were harvested fresh or dried to carry through the year. Their small seeds added a delicate crunch, and even those with missing teeth could enjoy them either mashed or softened in water. Unlike many other fruits, figs were abundant in Egypt's climate, thriving in the sun. They could be found in rural farm homes just as readily as in urban houses or temple storehouses. Even vegetables like turnips, leeks, and leafy greens found in marshy areas were used regularly. They also played a role in religious symbolism. Some vegetables were believed to possess protective qualities or healing properties. Onions, for instance, symbolized eternity because of their layered structure. This made them not only a food item but something that appeared in rituals, offerings, and burial goods. A farmer eating an onion with bread at night may not have thought of the symbolism every day, but the culture surrounding him had embedded deeper meaning into everyday meals. When the evening meal extended long enough, sometimes neighbors joined briefly, bringing small dishes or exchanging ingredients. A small clay pot of leftover chickpea stew might be traded for a handful of fresh cucumbers. Such exchanges strengthened community bonds, reminding each family that, despite the vastness of the desert surrounding them, they were not isolated. Their society valued cooperation and sharing, especially when the Nile's gifts depended on unpredictable floods. In households with higher status, more variety appeared. A scribe who worked in a government office at Thebes or Memphis might have access to imported foods. Almonds, pomegranates, or spices carried along trade routes stretching far beyond the borders of Egypt. These foods were treasured not just for their flavor but for the connection they symbolized. A wide world touched by commerce, diplomacy, and exploration. Imagine a small bowl of pomegranate seeds glowing like rubies in the lamplight. These weren't everyday foods, but when served, they made the meal feel special. Sometimes, wealthier families employed cooks who spent hours preparing meals. These cooks blended seasonings, experimented with new combinations, and learned techniques passed down from previous generations of cooks. They roasted meats on turning spits, simmered sauces from ground herbs, and served dishes on decorated plates instead of simple clay bowls. Yet even in these refined homes, the foundation remained similar. Bread, beer, and vegetables formed the heart of every meal, just as they did for the poorest farmer. Some households kept small gardens near the home where fresh herbs like cilantro, dill, and parsley grew. These herbs flavored stews, garnished dishes, and added brightness to otherwise plain meals. A woman might step outside just before dusk, barefoot on the cool soil, and gather a handful of herbs to sprinkle over the evening meal. The subtle aroma drifted through the house, mingling with the warmth of hearth smoke and the sweetness of dates. As you imagine these soft evening scenes, you can feel the steady, timeless flow of life along the Nile. The way people ate shaped their routines, their health, their rituals, and even their economy. From farmers to palace workers, from fishermen to artisans, each relied on the same river, the same soil, the same grains. Food wasn't just nourishment. It was the thread that tied every Egyptian to the land, to their ancestors, and to the gods they worshipped. If you listen closely, the night carries the whisper of distant animals, the rustle of palm fronds, the murmuring voices of families finishing their meals. Everything feels slow, grounded, and deeply human, as if time itself moves gently here, governed by the floodwaters and the stars above rather than the rush of modern life. As the soft sounds of the night deepen around the ancient Egyptian households, the pace of life gently slows, and the atmosphere settles into something calm and almost weightless. The evening fire crackles with the last of the cooking embers, giving off just enough warmth to keep the night comfortable. You can imagine the air, carrying tiny hints of roasted grains, mashed lentils, and the faint sweetness of drying dates left on woven trays. These modest scents layered together created a familiar comfort, one that generations before had known and generations after would still recognize. Inside the small, low-ceilinged homes, families often remained sitting even after they'd finished their food. Meals were not hurried events. They were extensions of the day's rhythm, a chance for everyone to pause and breathe. For many Egyptians, the evening meal wasn't only about eating but about reconnecting after long hours of work in the fields, workshops, or temples. The calm after dinner became a moment where adults shared observations about the flood cycle, harvest expectations, or stories from neighboring villages. Children listened, quietly absorbing the knowledge passed down casually, almost like the food itself was carrying traditions into their bodies and memories. Even as they cleaned their dishes, simple bowls, reed baskets, and clay cups, they were mindful of not wasting food. Bread crumbs were collected, vegetable scraps saved for animals, and water used sparingly. Nothing was discarded without purpose because in a land where the Nile gave but the desert constantly took, wastefulness was not something families could afford. Food had spiritual value as well. It was seen as a direct blessing from the gods, especially from deities such as Renenutit, the goddess of harvest, and Hapi, god of the Nile's annual flooding. Eating was not only physical nourishment, it was a quiet acknowledgement of divine generosity. In some homes, the quiet after the meal was occasionally interrupted by the sounds of grinding grain late into the night. Women who needed to prepare flour for the next day might work their grindstones under moonlight. The rhythmic sliding and scraping of stone over grain was a familiar noise across Egypt. This slow, repetitive motion shaped much of their lives and diets. The bread they ate daily in so many forms, flat, round, thick, dense, sweetened, flavored, began right there under their hands. It was a reminder of labor, care, and routine. Sometimes during these evening hours, farmers brought in small baskets of produce that had been harvested earlier, things that needed to dry, ferment, or store properly before the next meal. Garlic bulbs hung on ropes, onions piled neatly in corners where they stayed fresh, cucumbers arranged so they wouldn't crush one another. These vegetables, grown close to the irrigation channels, weren't just food but strategic parts of a household's economy. Families kept careful inventory because harvest seasons determined how comfortably they could eat in the days ahead. The hum of insects along the river's edge blended with the occasional splash of fish breaking the surface of the Nile. A fisherman returning late might wade through shallow water with a net thrown over his shoulder, hoping to bring home a few fish for the next morning's meal. Fresh fish was always valuable, its flavor rich, its presence filling, and its preparation simple. Even salted fish from earlier weeks still carried that river scent, reminding Egyptians that their lives were inseparable from that great waterway. Some households, especially those living near the edges of larger towns, had access to small markets where traders sold spices, herbs, and seasonal goods. These markets influenced what families ate each day. A cook passing through might bring home coriander seeds, dried fenugreek, or a handful of sesame if she could afford it. These ingredients, though simple by today's standards, brought deeper flavor into their stews and breads. Even the poorest families managed to add little touches of spice, giving their meals a personality shaped by local availability and household preference. Imagine a small bowl sitting beside a family's evening bread, filled with a mix of crushed garlic, ground coriander, and a drizzle of oil made from radish seeds. When a piece of dense, warm bread was dipped into this mixture, it transformed from a plain staple into something aromatic and satisfying. Egyptians knew how to elevate simple foods with technique rather than luxury. This made their cuisine consistent, recognizable, and comforting. After meals, the way people stored their food reveals even more about how they lived. Grains were kept in tall, rounded silos, sealed tightly from dust and animals. Beer jars were covered with pieces of cloth tied at the neck to allow fermentation without contamination. Dried fruits hung overhead in baskets where the airflow kept them from molding. Many vegetables, especially onions and garlic, were stored in long braids suspended from beams. This gave the room a constant earthy aroma, sharp, sweet, and slightly spicy all at once. As you picture these nighttime scenes, you can feel how deeply embedded food was in the routines of Egyptian life. Their rituals, beliefs, and economy all intertwined with what they grew, stored, and consumed. The Nile determined their calendars. Their calendars determined their farming. And their farming determined everything from the type of bread eaten at breakfast to the sweetness of dates savored before sleep. Even in wealthier homes, with their access to imported delicacies and refined cooking methods, the foundation remained rooted in the land and its rhythms. Skilled cooks prepared meals with more flourish, but they still relied on the same grains, vegetables, and fruits that shaped the diet of the entire civilization. In the lamplight of an elite household, one could see servants carefully slicing figs or arranging fresh geese for roasting. The scents were richer, the spices stronger, the portions larger, but the essence of Egyptian culinary tradition stayed the same. As the stars began to shine brighter over the desert sky, families across the kingdom eased further into rest. Their full stomachs, stretched mats, and softly burning lamps represented not just the end of a day but the continuation of a cultural rhythm that survived millennia. Eating was never just about food. It was part of who they were, a steady thread woven through every aspect of their civilization. The desert night drapes itself around the villages like a warm, heavy blanket, and the dim orange glow from tiny oil lamps flickers gently against the mud brick walls. In the distance, where the fields meet the river, the faint outline of palm trees sways softly, their tall silhouettes bending with the night breeze. Inside the homes, families linger in the quiet after their evening meal, their bodies finally resting after hours of work under the relentless Egyptian sun. This silence is not empty. It's filled with the comfort of routine, the familiarity of shared meals, the sense of belonging created by food that generations before them also ate. Sometimes, when the meals ended earlier, people found themselves peeling leftover garlic cloves or sorting through onions to separate those that would last from those that needed to be eaten soon. Their hands worked slowly, absent-mindedly, their fingers brushing against smooth skins and papery layers. You can almost feel the coolness of the onion surface. Hear the dry crackle as it flakes under their touch. These simple actions carried meaning. Managing food carefully meant surviving the harsher months ahead. Egyptians experienced times of plenty and times of uncertainty, so every family learned to respect their stores. The taste of their dinner still lingered in their mouths. The sweetness of dates, the subtle bitterness of beer, or the comforting earthiness of lentil stews. They didn't have an enormous variety of flavors compared to the world today, yet the flavors they did have were deeply rooted in their land. Even their beer tasted different from modern versions. Thicker, grainier, more filling. It wasn't a drink of pleasure but of nourishment, served with most meals. Children drank diluted versions, while adults consumed it almost like liquid bread. That unique taste stays in your imagination. Warm, cloudy, slightly tangy from fermentation, with bits of grain settling at the bottom. Some families kept animals, goats, ducks, geese, or even cattle if they had enough resources. These animals shaped what food appeared on the table. Goats provided milk that could be consumed fresh or turned into simple dairy products. While Egyptian cheese wasn't like the cheeses we know today, they made soft, crumbly versions that tasted mild and slightly salty. These early cheeses added richness to their meals, spread on bread or mixed into porridge. Picture a woman pressing curds into small baskets, letting whey drip through the woven reeds until the cheese firmed enough to be eaten. These quiet tasks added variety to meals in places where changes in diet were modest but meaningful. Ducks and geese provided eggs as well. Eggs were not eaten daily, but they were valuable and often saved for special meals. When cooked, they brought a satisfying richness to vegetable dishes or added protein to soups. A single boiled egg, sliced and shared, would elevate even the simplest dinner of bread and onions. The Egyptians appreciated these ingredients, not with extravagance, but with the calm satisfaction of people who understood the cycles of their land. In wealthier settings, evening meals could become more elaborate. They might include roasted duck seasoned with coriander and garlic or goose stuffed with leeks and barley. Meat was still precious, even for the wealthy, so it wasn't wasted. Every part, fat, bones, organs, had a culinary purpose. The fat flavored stews, bones created rich broths, and organs were used in dishes with spices strong enough to mask their intensity. Imagine a grand household where servants brought out trays of freshly cooked meat, the aroma drifting through painted columns, mixing with the scent of lotus oil used to perfume the air. Still, even in such settings, the basic structure of their diet, grains, vegetables, dates, and beer, remained unchanged. Fish continued to play an important role too. It was accessible, plentiful, and adaptable. Removing fish scales, gutting the body, rubbing it with salt, and laying it out in the sun to dry were common tasks along the riverbanks. You can visualize a row of fish hanging from lines, their skins shimmering under the sun during the day, preserved to be eaten later at night. When families prepared these dried fish for the evening, they softened them with water or cooked them into stews with onions and herbs. The flavor was stronger, saltier, but it paired perfectly with the hearty, thick bread that accompanied most meals. As night settled further, some families prepared small bedtime drinks or snacks. A cup of lightly sweetened beverage made from date syrup mixed with warm water offered comfort before sleep. The syrup, thick and dark, was stirred until it dissolved, releasing a gentle caramel-like aroma. It wasn't a luxury. It was a simple touch that made the night feel softer, especially for children who needed something warm after a long day. Others chewed on lotus seeds, which were eaten raw or roasted. These seeds carried a nutty, faintly sweet flavor, and were sometimes enjoyed as quiet evening snacks. Lotus itself was a deeply symbolic plant in Egypt, associated with rebirth, the rising sun, and spiritual purity. Eating its seeds or using its roots in meals tied everyday life to their beliefs, weaving the practical with the spiritual. In the silence after dinner, people also planned for the next day. A mother might check her store of grain and note whether she needed to grind more flour. A father might count how many fish were drying and which would be ready first. Even the simplest decisions, what type of bread to bake, which vegetables to use, whether to save dates for later, connected them to the rhythm of their environment. Nothing operated outside the influence of nature or the Nile's cycles. For temple workers or priests, evening meals sometimes followed rituals. Offerings given to the gods earlier in the day, loaves of bread, vegetables, dried fish, were redistributed among workers after ceremonies. These offerings weren't symbolic only. They were real food, consumed with reverence. Workers believed that eating what had been blessed or placed before the gods brought spiritual strength as well as physical nourishment. That connection between food and the divine made meals more than a biological necessity. They became acts of gratitude and spiritual continuity. The lower castes, such as laborers or servants, still found comfort in their simpler meals. Their portions were smaller, often limited to bread, beer, and vegetables. But even then they shared meals together, talking softly as they ate, finding relief in the break from work. In these moments, differences in class blurred slightly. Everyone ate the same staples, felt the same desert heat, relied on the same river. Food was the great equalizer, even if quality and quantity varied. As the final lamps dimmed, replaced by moonlight slipping through small windows, you can almost hear the gentle breathing of families drifting into sleep. With stomachs full of familiar foods, they laid down on mats, letting the cool desert air pass lightly across their skin. The world outside settled into a peaceful hum. The Nile's slow flow, the rustle of dry reeds, the faint calls of night creatures. Every evening meal, every plate of lentils or bread, carried them through life with a steady, unbroken continuity. Across centuries, this quiet ritual repeated itself, unchanged yet deeply meaningful. Their food wasn't extravagant, but it was reliable, symbolic, and intertwined with every part of their identity. The moon climbs higher over the quiet Egyptian landscape, casting pale silver light across the river's surface, where gentle ripples shimmer like moving glass. The hum of the night deepens, insects threading their soft calls through the warm air while far-off birds settle into the tall reeds along the banks. Inside the homes, most families have finished their evening routines. A few final bowls are wiped clean, mats are smoothed out for rest, and fires are reduced to the faintest glowing embers. Yet, before everyone drifts into sleep, there is still a lingering sense of reflection in the air. A calm pause where the mind settles on the meal just eaten and the world that sustains it. Some of the older villagers like to sit just outside their homes during this quiet time, enjoying the slight coolness that comes after sunset. They sit on low stools or even on flat stones, their hands resting on their knees as they gaze out toward the fields. With years etched into their faces, they think deeply about the rhythm of their lives, the same rhythm that governed their ancestors. Planting, harvesting, storing, preparing, and eating. Food was not just consumed. It tied them to every season, every hope, every laborious effort under the sun. The elders felt this connection strongly, carrying memories of drought years, abundant years, and all the subtle shifts in between. Nearby, younger adults continue small tasks that need to be completed before sleep. A woman might be sorting through beans, picking out those too dry or too split to cook properly. A man might be tying dried fish more securely onto ropes so they don't fall in the night breeze. These simple, almost silent tasks fill the hours after dinner with a feeling of purpose. While the meal itself is over, preserving and preparing the next meals never truly stops. Egyptian households moved as a unit. Every member, even children, played a part in ensuring the family remained fed. When a child woke during the night, perhaps restless or stirred by a dream, a parent might offer a small piece of dried fig or a sip of lightly sweetened water to settle them. The taste of figs, sticky, warm, and rich, was instantly soothing, a comfort passed down generation to generation. Children learned early to associate food not only with hunger but with safety, routine, and love. Even the simplest food, handled with care, carried emotional weight. The households closer to temples lived with an added layer of ritual. Food offerings, so central to their daily routines, shaped not only what they ate but when they ate it. Temple workers often consumed their meals after certain ceremonies, which meant their evenings might be offset from the common villagers. Their meals sometimes included bread loaves formed into shapes symbolizing protection or life, ankh shapes or small animal figures. But once the rituals ended and the offerings were distributed, the workers sat together and ate quietly, grateful for the nourishment from the gods' table. For scribes or artisans living near administrative centers, food offered a sense of normalcy after long days of precision labor. They sometimes enjoyed fruits that were less common among farmers, pomegranates or grapes when in season. The burst of tart juice from a pomegranate seed was a delight many looked forward to, especially during months when the heat felt suffocating. These fruits also reflected a growing network of trade routes, reminders that Egypt was never isolated. From Nubia came goods like incense and exotic oils. From the Levant came certain spices and fruits. From the Mediterranean regions came oils and occasionally wine. Scribes lived at the crossroads of information and goods, so their meals often carried small hints of the wider world. Still, even for them, the foundation remained unchanged. Bread formed the center of the meal. Bread shaped everything. Made from emmer wheat or barley, sometimes mixed with spices or sweeteners, sometimes plain, it represented stability. In some households, the loaves eaten tonight might have been baked earlier in communal ovens where women shared space, laughter, small gossip, and observations about their children or the rising floods. In others, the bread came from temple bakeries, produced in huge quantities to feed priests and workers. You can imagine the taste of that bread. Dense, slightly coarse from the grains, warm from the day's baking, and often carrying a faint smokiness from the clay ovens. When dipped into lentil stew or crushed garlic oil, it softened into a comforting bite that filled the stomach slowly and steadily. After years of eating this bread, Egyptians recognized every small variation. A little more coriander on some days, a slightly different texture when the grain came from a new harvest, a sweeter undertone when mixed with date syrup. In homes closer to the edges of the desert, where water was scarcer and the vegetation thinner, the meals were simpler. These families relied heavily on dried goods. Dried beans, dried fish, preserved dates, and onions braided by the dozens. Their vegetables were fewer, their access to meat even rarer. Yet even here, the evening meal carried warmth. Sharing bread around a small fire under the wide desert sky made even the simplest foods taste richer. The stars stretched endlessly overhead, and the land fell silent enough that each bite felt grounded in the earth beneath them. Sometimes, families gathered around traveling storytellers or musicians who wandered between villages. These performers accepted food as payment: loaves of bread, bowls of cooked lentils, or small handfuls of dried fruits. When a performer visited a household in the evening, the family often offered them a place near the fire and shared their meal. In return, the performer would play a soft melody on a flute or recount an old tale. These brief visits made meals feel more special, turning ordinary nights into small memories that children cherished. As the weight of the night deepens, the riverbanks settle completely. Only the occasional splash from a passing fish breaks the silence. The homes closer to the Nile smell faintly of wet soil and fresh reeds, blending with the lingering scent of cooked grains from earlier meals. This sensory mix became an invisible part of daily life, something no Egyptian thought about but everyone lived within. In wealthier quarters, small lamps continued burning longer into the night. Servants cleaned kitchens, ground spices, or prepared ingredients for the next day. Their hands moved swiftly but quietly, aware that the household slept nearby. If the kitchen had recently prepared something special, perhaps roasted goose or a stew seasoned richly with cumin and garlic, the air still carried those aromas hours later. The faint perfume of roasted meat might cling to the walls, reminding even those half asleep that they lived in privilege. Despite these differences in setting, riverbank huts, desert outposts, temple quarters, administrative districts, the core experience of evening meals remained universally steady. Food in Egypt was both ordinary and sacred. It was survival and culture, routine and symbolism. Each bite carried the weight of land, climate, religion, labor, and community. Even now, as the lamps finally dim behind small windows and the vast sky stretches untouched above them, their meals still echo in their bodies. The grains ground at dawn, the vegetables chopped at noon, the bread baked in the heat of the afternoon. These rhythms define them more deeply than any monument or inscription. The night hushes itself around the riverbanks, as though even the crickets have decided to rest their little tired legs. You sit there imagining the entire ancient land settling into a quiet exhale, and it's strange how real it feels now. As if you truly wandered into the kitchens, the granaries, the dusty walkways lined with pottery jars, and the soft warmth of hearths you never knew you needed. And as the darkness thickens, the people of ancient Egypt continue their rituals of preparing the last meals of the day, because eating wasn't only nourishment, it was a rhythm tied to their spiritual and daily lives. A family somewhere inland lowers themselves onto woven mats, their lamp flickering a weak little flame that pushes small glimmers across bowls of stew. You imagine that stew again: lentils, onions, garlic, coriander, and maybe a handful of chickpeas softened until they melt on the tongue. The air is thick with the mellow aroma, but no one speaks. Eating before sleep was a peaceful act, something that closed the day gently rather than rushed it. Outside, the heat finally releases its grip, and with it you can almost feel the coolness softening the sand under your feet. It makes you think of how much food relied on temperature, entirely shaped by the land. Grapes stored in clay jars could only last so long, dates lasted longer, and dried fish depended on how carefully it had been salted. Even the timing of eating was a dance with climate. Too hot and the bread dried too fast. Too humid and stored grain spoiled. Everything, absolutely everything, depended on understanding the mood of the Nile Valley. Somewhere close to the fields, workers preparing for the next morning eat in near darkness. Their meals were always simple, but never unimportant. A piece of barley bread torn with rough fingers. Few onions. Maybe a crumbly piece of cheese if their household had goats. And you picture the soft sound of chewing in the quiet night. A sound so human across time that it pulls you closer to them as though you're sitting right beside them, sharing the last bite. You notice the silence again. That soft, sleepy kind of silence. It lets you drift deeper into imagining what it felt like to eat food grown with your own hands. Each bite carried the texture of the land. The grit of soil that was sometimes impossible to wash out completely, the aroma of the crops harvested under a sun that never apologized for its intensity, the satisfaction of filling your belly with something that came from your own effort. That connection made every meal more meaningful. Not dramatic, not poetic, just real. And real things linger. Far in the distance, priests finish their own meals. Small, controlled portions. Their diet was intentionally disciplined, guided by the purity demanded in temple life. They too ate bread, vegetables, fruits, and sometimes fish, but everything was monitored. They would wash before meals, after meals, during rituals, between rituals. Cleanliness wasn't optional. It was sacred. Even their bread often lacked certain additions to keep their diets aligned with purity requirements. This subtle, strict difference changed the flavor of their daily life, shaping their relationship with food into something that belonged to devotion as much as hunger. Then inside grander homes, wealthier families lean closer to flickering lamps while servants bring wooden trays of prepared dishes. A platter of roasted duck glistens faintly. A bowl of honey-drizzled figs reflects the light like tiny amber gems. Wheat bread, softer, richer, rarer than barley, sits in a woven basket. Wine rests in tall ceramic jars that took days to produce. It's not loud or glamorous. Even the wealthy ate in a quiet, steady pattern, because meals weren't parties. They were simply part of life, shaped by abundance rather than ceremony. And despite the differences between rich and poor, they shared one strange, simple bond. Everyone drank beer. Everyone depended on it. You can almost hear the comforting bubbles, the soft glug of a jar being tipped, the way the liquid smelled slightly yeasty, slightly sweet, slightly earthy. Beer wasn't a drunk drink. It was hydration, calories, nutrition, safety from contaminated water, and comfort all in one. You can imagine the faint froth at the top, the thicker body, the grainy texture. A drink that wasn't smooth, but was real and reliable. And as this slow, gentle night continues, you picture the Nile flowing quietly under the moon. That river carried not just silt or fish or trade, but the entire diet of a civilization. It was the reason barley grew, the reason vegetables sprouted, the reason orchards survived, the reason people fished, the reason bread existed. Without the river, there would have been no meals, no food culture, no recipes passed through households, no baskets filled with fruit, no jars storing grain. The river didn't only feed the land, it fed the people, one meal at a time. Now you drift toward one last image before this batch closes. A woman wrapping leftover bread in linen. She tucks it into a jar with slow, practiced hands. She isn't in a hurry because she's done it thousands of times. She checks the lid, adjusts it once, twice, and then blows the lamp beside her, plunging the room into a darkness that was completely normal to her. In that darkness, the quiet smells of grain, clay, and cooling stew remain floating around her, fading gently until the night swallows them. And in that darkness, you feel the ancient world settle, quiet, peaceful, full from a day of honest food, and waiting for the next sunrise to start the cycle again. The night deepens over the Nile like a dark blue blanket being pulled slowly across the sky, tucking the whole land into a kind of ancient stillness. You can almost feel how the air cools against the warm stones of the houses, how the last breaths of cooking smoke fade into the quiet, how the world holds its breath for a moment before sleep settles in for everyone. Every household that cooked, shared, or stored food that evening now relaxes into the rhythm of a civilization shaped entirely by what the land offered. Somewhere, a small clay oven cools, its embers glowing like tired eyes ready to close. The faint scent of baked barley loaves lingers in the air, reminding you of every meal described so far. Bread torn by hand, beer sipped slowly, fruits eaten in the shade, vegetables simmered into soft stews, fish grilled on simple metal hooks. You can imagine each of these moments collected in your mind now like tiny beads on a thread, forming a necklace of memories that never truly belonged to you, yet somehow feel deeply familiar. It is quiet. Overwhelmingly quiet. The kind of quiet that lets you hear your own heartbeat if you sit still long enough. In that silence, you begin to picture all those people. Farmers, fishermen, bakers, weavers, servants, priests, scribes, mothers, children, everyone drifting into sleep with their stomachs filled by the ancient world you've been walking through with me. Their meals were simple, repetitive, comforting, sometimes scarce, sometimes abundant, but always a part of the slow-moving river of life that connected every sunrise to every sunset. And the more you imagine them sleeping, the more you sense something else beneath the calm surface of the night. A feeling that the story of their food isn't finished. Because the river never really rests. Even now, in your mind, you can sense the current pushing forward, carrying the promise of tomorrow's harvests, tomorrow's fishing nets, tomorrow's grinding stones turning grain into meal. It's as if the Nile itself whispers that the next day will bring new ingredients, new meals, new rituals tied to the land. You feel yourself standing at the river's edge, the cool air brushing against your skin, and there's a quiet, gentle suspense there, like something ancient is waiting to be uncovered, just beneath the surface of that dark water. A story not yet told, a flavor not yet tasted, a discovery the people didn't know they were about to find. And as the moonlight ripples across the water, your imagination leans closer, almost expecting something to rise, a boat carrying spices from far lands, a fisherman returning with an unfamiliar catch, a priest walking with a sealed jar containing ingredients not yet named in the records we've explored. Something is about to happen, something small but important, and you can feel that little pull, that little cliffhanger tugging at the edge of your thoughts. But for now, for this moment, it's okay to let all of it rest. You've walked through thousands of years of meals, ingredients, flavors, and routines, and your mind has carried every detail with a quiet patience. So now let it soften, let it slow, let it loosen its grip. Because the world of ancient Egypt can wait for you, has waited for millennia already. So go ahead, gently close your eyes. Take a slow breath in, through your nose. Fill your chest. Let the air stretch your lungs just a little. Hold it. Just a warm second. And let it go. Slowly. Like the river releasing the day. Again, a slow breath in, calm. Steady. Soft. And breathe out. Allowing every leftover thought to drift, float. Dissolve like grains of sand slipping back into the riverbed. Rest your shoulders. Relax your jaw. Let the heaviness behind your eyes settle like dusk settling over the fields. And know that whenever you want to return, the ancient world will be waiting. Quietly. Patiently. With another story simmering just beneath the surface of time.